Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 5th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Sarah Chayes on corruption in America and what is at stake. Meanwhile, all eyes on Georgia as Joe Biden provides at least 2,000 reasons to give Dems control of the Senate. LA County hospitals are in crisis as paramedics are told not to transport COVID patients who have a low chance of survival. Will he or won't he? Mike Pence in the hot seat as Republican senators vote tomorrow in an attempt to overthrow the election results. Meanwhile, progressives seek an 11th hour impeachment over Trump's Georgia call. And the U.S. will stick with a two-dose regime of vaccinations, though most of those vaccine doses are now sitting idle. And a day out from Trump's Proud Boy rally in D.C., one of the Proud Boy leaders are arrested for lighting a historic black church's Black Lives Matter banner on fire. In the wake of California's Proposition 22, Vons and Pavilions markets fire essential workers and replace them with contractors. Trump's EPA takes a final aim at health studies in a last attempt to cripple environmental regulations. And lastly, DOJ claims that the census data has hit a snafu and will miss its statutory deadline. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma. How are you?
Hello, Sam. I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm hanging in there. I am very. I'm a little anxious about Georgia, to be honest with you. The stakes obviously are huge. We have exceptionally high turnout at this point. My understanding is turnout is 23% lower than it was in the November election, relatively speaking. But this is a special election, and that's still pretty amazing. And the November election was had an enormous turnout. So there's a lot of enthusiasm there. There's also about over 100,000 people now, 112,000 voters who did not vote in the 2020 general election, who are voting, who have voted in this election so far.
Yeah. So it's around 3 million early votes cast, and that's 40% of registered voters in Georgia already.
And that's, I mean, you know, look, there's indications that there's been increased turnout amongst younger people and amongst African Americans. Very hard to read these tea leaves.
I know. I mean, these all sound like positive signs, but once again, we've been here before where we're talking about these wonderful signs for the Democrats. And what do you know? The Republican Party stronghold stands firm. And now you have Trump going to Georgia, which I know we'll talk about, but Loeffler's promising, I'll contest the election results. Could rile up the base. We'll see. It might be too late, though. Again, we just don't know.
We don't know. But what was very interesting was that Joe Biden was in Georgia last night. And the reporting over the past couple of weeks was that Joe Biden was basically telling Democrats in the House in particular to prior to Donald Trump coming out and saying he wanted $2,000 checks. That Joe Biden has basically been saying, sort of back off this a little bit. However, Donald Trump provided an opening. Nancy Pelosi, to her credit, took it. They could have just stopped at attempting unanimous consent, but they pushed it all the way to a vote. They had to suspend the rules because it was a change in regular order. And they passed it. They sent it to the Senate. Mitch McConnell killed it, even though Loeffler and Perdue had come out and said they were now for it because they had been being hammered by John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in this race. And Joe Biden, yesterday in Georgia, essentially just laid it right on the line. He said that despite the fact that Loeffler and Perdue might want it, you're not going to get it if Mitch McConnell maintains control of the Senate. Here's Joe Biden.
One state can chart the course, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next generation. By electing John and the Reverend, you can make an immediate difference in your own lives, the lives of the people all across this country, because their election will put an end to the block in Washington on that $2,000 stimulus check. That money that will go out the door immediately, tell people who are in real trouble. Think about what it'll mean to your lives. Putting food on the table, paying rent, paying for your mortgage, paying down the credit card, paying the phone bill, the gas bill, the electric bill. Just look around. Millions of people in this country out of work through no fault of their own. No fault of their own. They're struggling. Many are fearful, and many have given up hope. Look at the lines at food banks. Hours and hours and hours. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. And their food lines, like we've not seen since the Depression. And they're getting longer. Families, children, people have worked their whole lives and never asked for a thing except a fighting chance. Now, they're lining up for food in America. And the debate over $2,000 isn't some abstract debate in Washington. It's about real lives, your lives, the lives of good, hardworking Americans. And if you're like millions of Americans all across this country, you need the money, you need the help, and you need it now. Look, Georgia, there's no one in America with more power to make that happen than you, the citizens of Atlanta, the citizens of Georgia.
I mean, it's, I have some issues with the rhetoric. We'll take that in a second. But the reality is that I think it's easy to overestimate what can happen if the Democrats take the Senate, because you still have folks like Joe Manchin and would-be Joe Manchins who are going to place themselves right in the middle of these two parties and make sure that everything has to go through them, and they'll be a little bit skimpy about stuff. That's the way they get attention. But the fact is that Joe Biden laid it out there with the $2,000. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more that comes with allowing for a Democratic Senate, but that makes it very, very simple. And that's pretty compelling. Now, with that said, I don't necessarily appreciate the idea that, no fault of their own, because it sets up a dynamic that very often, or maybe, sometimes, or in normal times, if people lose their jobs, it's a fault of their own. Or if they're living in poverty, it's a fault of their own, as opposed to structural things. In fact, our guest is going to talk about that, I suspect, today, that lead to that. But as a campaign pitch, as a last day, as a closing argument, that's pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, and I actually think it's fairly well suited for Georgia there. I mean, he's an old school kind of Democrat, and typically southern states like that have churned out Democrats who espouse similar rhetoric here. I mean, Ossoff, for example, he's not Bernie Sanders. So I was pleasantly surprised by this. I hope he did talk to Joe Manchin and the other centrist Democrats who are going to try to be kingmakers in this instance. But it's not just the right strategy, or it's not just the right policy, because it's simple and it gets relief to people quickly and easily. But it's also the right move strategically. And I think this goes against a lot of Biden's inclinations to be more centrist, means testy. But this policy has shown, and stimulus checks have shown to be so popular. They gave Trump a boon in a way that I think Democrats underestimated going into the November election. And larger checks would help Democrats long term. So even if they're just thinking in a self-interested manner, it's the right thing to do. And Biden should be pushing for this. We'll see what happens if both Democrats win and both those seats turn blue. This could not happen, and then they face a whole different set of problems.
I'm not convinced it's not consistent with Biden, because I don't think that Biden has that strong of an ideological perspective. I think he saw the House vote overwhelmingly for this, and he likes to put himself right in the middle, regardless of where that is. And so the point that I think it shows us on some level is that if there is an ability to push our politics to the left, he is not going to swim against that tide. He is going to land right in the middle of wherever the argument is. And if you have overwhelming support from a Democratic House on an issue, he will move to place himself a certain distance, relative. He's always going to keep himself.
I think there's a caveat if that movement helps Democrats, the Democratic Party as a whole electorally. I think that's key to his shift on this issue, because they are convinced that it hinges, the Senate runoffs.
I think that's true too. Meanwhile, here is Donald Trump. He was in Georgia yesterday, and he was ostensibly there to promote the Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. David Perdue, I think, is still in quarantine because of COVID. Kelly Loeffler got up on stage with him and promised that she would vote to overturn the election results for president, which is her last-ditch cynical attempt to get some votes there. But here's Donald Trump saying, ostensibly, vote for Loeffler and Perdue, but really, unsurprisingly, making it about Donald Trump.
Nothing and no one will be able to stop them. These Senate seats are truly the last line of defense. Now, I must preface that by saying, because they'll say, he just conceded. No, I don't concede. So, Kelly, if I might add, I think we're going to win, in which case we'll be the last line of defense. It's called veto, 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 veto.
I love that so much. He undercuts.
Totally undercut the whole reason why he was there. He's
not that anyone's really paying attention, but it's like, she's the last line of defense, except we're actually going to win the election, so I'm the last line of defense, so who really cares?
We don't really need her. In fact, let me explain to you why we don't need Kelly Loeffler there, because I'm going to veto.
Veto.
There you go. And so Donald Trump, I mean, look, let's put it this way. If Warnock and Ossoff win these races, there are two reasons. One is because of the organizing that has taken place over the past couple of years, really leading up to Stacey Abrams' loss, in quotes, to Brian Kemp, and I think her showing, which continued the organizing and gave people a sense of wow, we can actually do this in Georgia. That's reason number one. And reason number two has to be Donald Trump fractured this party and sent a mixed message and may have depressed the voter turnout. But we will see tonight. We will cover that. And in a moment, we're going to be talking to Sarah Chayes on her most recent book on corruption in America. What is at stake? In the meantime, now I have to say, I have this problem with my daughter. And it's a little embarrassing, but I have to remind actually both my kids, keep the door shut when you go to the bathroom.
Ah,
Yeah, that's pleasant.
I'm sure she appreciates that.
Yes.
Said.
Well, most normal people shut the door when they go to the bathroom. So why would you let people look in on you when you go online? Using the internet without ExpressVPN, it is like going to the bathroom with the door open. And believe me, that is distasteful. Your internet service provider, and I think you know this, Emma, knows every single website you visit.
Yes.
I realized this when I got fiber in, and I was talking to one of the tech people. I'm like, oh, yeah, no, I can see you're connected now. Yeah, go to, I just saw you. And I'm like, what?
Not good.
No. What's worse, they can sell this information to ad companies and tech giants who's going to use your data to target you. ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so the online activity cannot be seen by anybody. It works on all your devices. You can put it on your phone. I got it on my laptops. You can even have it on your routers so everyone who shares your Wi-Fi can still be protected even if they don't have ExpressVPN. So we can do that for the whole family. Just fire up the app. You click one button, you're protected. ExpressVPN is the world's #1 rated VPN by CNET, by Wired, by The Verge, countless others.
Wow.
Yep, it's pretty awesome. And I will say this. It also, I mean, you can watch some shows in some other countries. And this VPN is, I have most of my experiences with ExpressVPN, but I can tell you it's super easy. I mean, I thought it was some type of like hodgepodge. You put the app on, you click it, boom, you're done. So if you're like me and you want to keep your online activity your own business, secure yourself by visiting expressvpn.com/majority today. Use my exclusive link, ExpressVPN, ExpressVPN.com/majority. You can get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/majority. Also, I've talked about this in the past. Back in the day, I was very reluctant to use any type of deodorant because I didn't want to have all that stuff that is in deodorants. And
aluminum, all that kind of garbage. Yeah.
Yes. Did not want that. Then, of course, I became single again, and I decided maybe it's time for me to pick that up. And fortunately, there was an antiperspirant there for me, and that was Native. It is made of ingredients that you have heard of, things like coconut oil, shea butter, has no aluminum, no parabens, no talc. And also, for me, what I like, they have one that's unscented, and that's the one I use because I don't like
to smell like yourself.
I don't like any smells. I don't want to smell like. I don't want anything to smell.
What about apples?
I like apples. I like the smell of apples. If they had apples, I would probably do apples. But floral things I can't handle. It's just I get allergic to it. But that's not the point. They have over 10 cents for people who do like smell, and they have, like I say, they have unscented, which is. They don't call it the Sam Cedar, but that's what they should. Native's classic scents include coconut and vanilla, lavender and rose. I cannot go near the lavender. I'm sorry, folks. Cucumber and mint I've tried, actually, and that's okay. I like that one. And citrus and herbal musk. Like I say, they also have the unscented option, and they have a sensitive collection that's made without baking soda. If one of your New Year's resolutions is to cut down on your plastic consumption, Native now offers a line of plastic-free deodorants in their most popular scents. There's a reason why Native has over 16,000 five-star reviews, and it's because it works. Get free shipping on every order, plus 30-day free returns and exchanges in the U.S. You can make the switch to Native today by going to native.com/majority report, or use the promo code majority report at checkout. You get 20% off your first order. That's native.com/majority report. Use the promo code majority report at checkout for 20% off your first order. And lastly, folks who also know me know that I'm very much a creature of habit. I don't like to have to think about anything. So I get in ruts occasionally where I wear the same pants. And as you can see, I have a very narrow rotation of shirts. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to do any thinking. That's what I like. The stuff I have to do every day or normal course of whatever, I don't want to think about it. And that is why honey makes my life just a tiny bit easier. I'm also obsessed about finding coupons online because I don't like to pay full price for anything. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I get it.
And I sat my daughter down. I was like, showed her, well, all you can, it is so much easier now because all you need to do is add Honey to your browser for free, and you can shop on all your favorite websites like normal. If Honey finds a coupon, it will automatically tell you as you're going to check out. It applies the correct codes, drops the price in a flash. You don't have to think. You don't have to remember. You don't have to search. It's just completely automated. It's already found $1 billion in savings automatically. Honey is literally a no-brainer, and that's why I like it.
It's
just
great.
a few seconds. It's super easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, that's the thing. It's not even easy. You do it once and you never even think about it.
I have it as a plugin on Google Chrome, and it just checks as we check out.
I saved, I don't remember how much it was, a couple of bucks on just, I had to get a pair of headphones for Saul, so he could listen to his iPad and not have to bother me.
I got my mom a nice sweater for Christmas. I saved like $25.
Really?
It was
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Try Honey today at joinhoney.com/majority. That's joinhoney.com/majority. And lastly, folks, got an email from a longtime fan and listener, Megan, whose husband, Jeff, is a therapist working in the ICU at a major hospital here in New York City. Folks, the folks who are working in these hospitals, in addition, of course, to all the people who are essential workers who are working at the grocery stores, who are delivering your packages, but obviously our medical folks have been just, really, they've been heroic in the efforts they're putting out. Well, it's his birthday, and so shout out to Jeff. Happy birthday. We'll give you one of these. Thank you for the work you're doing, Jeff. And also, your wife wants to remind you to please wash your beloved Left is Best Majority Report sweatshirt. It's due for a launderer. All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Want to welcome to the program Sarah Chayes, author of On Corruption in America, What is at Stake? Do we have Sarah?
She's joining now, it looks like.
Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. Congratulations on your latest book. Like I say, On Corruption in America, What's at Stake. It is a very broad look at corruption, not just, I think, ultimately leading up to America, but it's sort of the existence of it. And I want to start where you more or less start. And we'll circle back to how you got back to America. But this is with King Midas in Anatolia, which for most people, I'm not sure they remember where Anatolia is back in 600 BC, but it was part of the Persian Empire, I guess, located, I guess, more or less.
It's basically where modern Turkey is.
Right.
And in fact, it was in this sort of cultural in-between place. It was largely inhabited by Greeks. So it's in this cultural in-between place between Persian and sort of more Eastern and Greek culture. And I'm thrilled that you started there because it's not every book on corruption in America that is going to plunge people into, 6th century BC mythology, right?
I don't know if there's any other book.
And just to reassure anyone who might want to read this book, it's not like I try to do an entire history of corruption from 600 BC until today. I've selected specific moments, both in sacred stories and then in American history, but a particular time in American history that I find are particularly emblematic and instructive. And so this really is about money. What I found that was so astonishing, so Midas, this is the guy with the golden touch, right? So he gives a god a gift, or he does something for a god who says you can have one gift, and he says, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. And it takes him about, 37 seconds to realize, bad idea. And it's usually told as a just straight up story about greed. What I found in looking at the archaeology of Anatolia is that, in fact, there was a Midas, and he lived just about where and when money as an instrument was invented. It's actually a myth about money, which is a revolutionary new way at the time of storing and transferring value. And what's most critical about it to the issue of corruption is that, unlike other modes of storing value, which are very bulky, and therefore really only kings can hoard it, or you have to take care of it, like it's sheep and it's fig trees and things like that, and you have to lavish care and attention on it. Money, there's like no finish line. Once money becomes the measure of social standing, there's no such thing as enough anymore, because, hey, Sam, you got, what does the Forbes, say for you? It says 1.2 billion. Okay, well, I need 1.5 billion. And then you need 7.8 billion and, whatever. I mean, it becomes this race with no finish line to do what? And this is back to the Midas myth. He touches an apple, it turns into gold. He touches his daughter, she turns into gold. Meaning, you're transforming everything of intrinsic, irreplaceable value into money. Once a society turns itself over to people with the Midas disease, corruption is inevitable.
And I mean, and that is, I guess that is almost, the corruption's inevitable just from the development of this idea of, I guess, on some level of commodification, but to have a sort of a commodification that is almost sort of like not necessarily tangible. I mean, money is tangible, of course, but
you're exactly right.
And it also, it occurs to me that as a mechanism of fueling conquest, right? And to provide for, as soldiers get this script, and those that they conquer must essentially, they have to pay back to their conquerors in tax what the soldiers provide for them. That's what creates the value. But there's also intrinsically a power dynamic that is created just in the existence of the money, right? I mean,
yes. I mean, once your society is monetized, the person who, so the paradox of money is when it first makes its appearance in a society in bulk, it actually has a democratizing effect, because it cuts against, hierarchies that are based on bloodlines or conquest or whatever. So when money first hits, be it in ancient Greece, so there's a real connection between the great Athenian democracy and the arrival of money from Anatolia, and similarly in the Netherlands, when the Spanish were hauling all of this silver out of Latin America at, as you suggest, irreparable cost to human societies and landscapes. But in the Netherlands, it resulted in a real democracy that really laid the foundations of ours. And similarly, around the time of the American Revolution, there wasn't enough specie, so we started printing paper money. The problem is, once money becomes the mark of social standing, then you have new aristocracies or new elites that build themselves around the hoarding of this money and, as you suggest, the conversion of everything. And export ends up being a really important aspect of that, because you're monetized. So, for example, we don't need to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but the Spanish found all of this gold and silver in south of here. The English didn't find much of that. But what did they convert into gold? They converted whale oil. They converted beaver skins. They converted, and so you have bison, so you have the extermination of these natural resources because they're being converted to gold. And now the United States is in a very similar situation with fossil fuels, where we are, I'm speaking to you from the state of West Virginia, that has been basically penetrated, if you will, by multiple pipelines over the last, 4 or 5 years. And that's all about export. It's not about, West Virginia getting to even burn any of this gas. It's all about, so once you're exporting fossil fuels, there's no finish line. There's no end to that market. And so anyway, I mean, these are some of the issues that arise. And the point is, once you have groups of people who are sick with the Midas disease and are competing over hoarding money, they are going to rig the system to allow, even though they're rivals amongst each other, they unite to rig the system to allow members of their networks, even rival members, to exploit these resources, and resources including human beings, human creativity, human labor, what have you.
Okay, there's a lot that brings up, and I'm going to circle back to that. But now I want to go a little bit forward in time as to your motivation in writing this. You have studied corruption in Afghanistan. Obviously, you were there for nearly a decade, and in Nigeria and Uzbekistan, and your attention turned to America because of the former governor from Virginia. Just explain that and how it occurred to you to apply those sort of lessons you had learned, and it became clear that this was an issue for America as well.
Let's say that was already building to some extent as I came to understand the magnitude of the 2008 meltdown. But you are exactly right that it was the Supreme Court decision in the corruption case of former Governor Bob McDonnell that made me realize now, like not tomorrow, now you have to start working on this. Because, so there's a guy, I mean, just classic textbook corruption where, a businessman who's like actually a tobacco guy turned pharmaceutical, right? Who had cooked up some kind of pills that are tobacco based that needed, clinical trials, right? In order to really be marketable. Or, for example, if they could be listed in the Virginia list of what Virginia public servants would get reimbursed for. He was looking for ways of breaking into the market with this thing. So he gives the governor all kinds of stuff, about 180, not even that much, he was a cheap date, $180,000 worth of loans and gifts and rides in Ferraris and whatnot. And the governor did everything he could, for this guy. He instructed his, head of Department of Education, to try to run the trials. He threw a party where the businessman could, dole out $10,000 checks so people could apply for grants. It was as straightforward as you could ask for. So the governor gets convicted. He appeals. The conviction is upheld unanimously on appeal. And then he appeals it to the Supreme Court. And the decision comes down in the summer of 2016 when, the electoral campaign is in full swing. And I have to say, if the Supreme Court had just overturned it, I wouldn't have been wildly shocked. What wildly shocked me was that the Supreme Court overturned the decision 8-0.
Right.
8-0. And the argument was that basically this is politics, and that if this were upheld, much of politics in Washington would be prosecutable. And that, in fact, right, exactly. I'm looking at your expression, and it's like, yeah, and, right. And what was fascinating was the contention that the United States had more to fear from prosecutorial overreach in corruption cases than it does from corruption itself. I mean, my jaw was, skittering across the floor someplace. And this was, weeks before Trump started with his, rigged system.
Right.
It was while Bernie Sanders was making a pretty cogent case about political corruption. And between the two of them, and I'm not making a comparison here, but between the two of them, who were both seen as complete outsider candidates, they certainly amassed, a majority of American voters. So corruption, within weeks of that decision, upended the U.S. political system.
Right. And then, of course, this also, falls in line with Citizens United, where there was just this complete refusal to acknowledge the idea of even like things can appear to be corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. But all right, so you argue that that corruption is on a continuum, but there are moments in time, particularly in the context of this country, where it becomes something that is qualitatively different, that it's not just a matter of there being more corruption or less corruption, an ebb and a flow, but there is a moment where you cross a threshold where something fundamentally changes. And you specifically look at the Gilded Age from, I don't know, about 1870-ish to, I guess, up until like 1930-ish. Talk about what it is that well, I want to talk about the Gilded Age, but what it is that changes it from a quantitative amount of corruption to a qualitative change in our society.
That's a great way of putting it, which I didn't use those words, and so I thank you for that. It's exactly so. The distinction I would say is between corruption being an occasional venal act by an individual public official and or a couple of friends or whatever, even a lot of those. That's one side of the line. The other side of the line is when corruption becomes, if you will, the operating system. And the operating system deployed by, and this is an idea that a lot of people have, balk at a little bit, so bear with me, but by networks. Now, these networks can be dynamic, they can be shifting, they can be beset by internal rivalries, but fundamentally they are networks that are operating for the enrichment of their members. And there are a couple of really key aspects to this. One is the networks span every possible social and economic divide you can imagine, meaning you have members, public officials and business people, often out and out criminals, often violent, terrorists or violent gangs. So if you will, there are kind of four strands to these things. They also cut across the primary identity divides in a society. And that's part of what makes them so difficult to uproot, because they are welded across the political divides, the sectarian divides, the, race divides, which they then instrumentalize. They then turn around and use those same divides as a way of splitting up the potential majority indignant population challenge to them. Another point to make, so then two other sort of corollaries to that. What that means is lopping off, so I use in the book the Hydra, the metaphor of the Hydra on corruption in America to represent this, because you lop off one head of these networks and they reconfigure. It just knocking off the top guy. And it's happened around the world half a dozen times in the last half a dozen years, at least. And very often the networks reconfigure and remain in power. Secondly, it suggests a different way of understanding corruption, because what I just described with Bob McDonnell is how most Americans think of corruption, which is to say, venal guy gives venal official some stuff in return for which venal official does something for the venal guy. Or you have venal official simply helping him or herself out of the public kitty, or diverting a public contract to a pal who then kicks part of it back. That's how we understand corruption. When you're talking about networks, the actions of people, of network members in public office, are often much less directly quid pro quo than that. Their actions often have to do with bending or repurposing or even crippling state powers, state functions, government agencies, government institutions in ways that will benefit the network as a whole, or certain segments of the network, with the hope of return sometime later. But it's not going to be this direct quid pro quo kind of thing. Or maybe they will have gotten a favor beforehand, or maybe it's going to be their kid or friends. Do you see what I mean? Like the favors are
beyond as much as it is a specific specific return. It's creating an environment where returns are likely.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's a kind of tissue of reciprocal things where the timing of the quid and the quo are often distant or indirect.
I mean, it's just,
yeah, just the point though is that I'm just interjecting here to say that this court framework, what has been set up in the past multiple decades of case law is that quid pro quo is the only standard with which you can measure corruption, unless it's also the appearance of corruption. But based on what you're talking about, they barely see anything as corruption. I mean, the idea that prosecution of corruption is too prevalent and is going to be abused isn't anywhere close to the reality because of what we're discussing right now.
That's exactly right, Emma. In other words, and it's something I chart in On Corruption in America, is an actual deliberate campaign to narrow the legal definition of corruption while the phenomenon itself is exploding. So that definitely, just like Citizens United was the result of a deliberate campaign, the public corruption interpretations also.
Buckley v. Vallejo. I mean, it's been narrowing for many decades. So
that's right. And that was the other thing that struck me when that opinion came down, was the huge divergence between public understanding of what corruption is, what systemic corruption. So let's go back to what Sam has been driving at, that we're in a moment now, like we were in the Gilded Age, where corruption is the operating system in the United States. And most Americans get that, frankly. Who doesn't is the elites. So the elites are clinging, people like the justices. I'm not saying that they are actively members of kleptocratic networks, but they certainly have adopted the mindset that has been instilled by kleptocratic networks as to what the definition of corruption is. And the divergence between the two understandings is such that when I looked at developing countries where the divergence was this significant, very frequently some kind of explosion resulted, either a violent insurgency or an uprising or, some kind of pretty dramatic explosion. One could argue that the election of 2016 was that explosion for the United States.
Or there's more to come.
Or there's more to come. That's right.
And we should say that what you're talking about in terms of this sort of environment, this environment that's created, is in part what why people look at the Janet Yellen's buckraking with her speeches over the course of a couple of years and making millions of dollars by speaking to these folks, or whether it was with Clinton and her speeches. That there is a sense that there's not necessarily a quid pro quo here, but there is we're in one environment where we have a distinct set of rules which allows for a certain latitude, and then everybody else is in a different environment, essentially. Let me ask you this. These networks which are created, or they always do they always exist, or how conscious do they replicate and strengthen? So we're coming out of the Civil War. We're in Reconstruction at this point. And And there's a lot of other things that are going on. We're like literally reconstructing as well. And is there a vacuum in which these networks flourish and become stronger? Or is there a self-consciousness? Like, why? Because you bring this back in that, starting with Reagan in many respects and leading up even from the Powell memo, et cetera, that we're headed into another Gilded Age. And there's
definitely.
How self-conscious is that? Or is it simply that there's always pressure, and then when there's a slight vacuum or an opening, that pressure just sort of fills and starts to take over?
It's a really interesting question and a very important question. And I can't definitively answer it, but I think there are some pretty important markers. One is the degree to which these networks intermarry. That suggests a certain deliberateness of purpose. No. They intermarry. Sorry?
Literally intermarry.
Literally intermarry. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They literally intermarry. Also, in the Gilded Age, they were sitting on each other's boards of directors. So even where you didn't have officially a trust, the companies were interlocking. So interlocking boards of directors is another really interesting example. And then the deliberate placement of network members in positions of governmental power. So the most obvious example one obvious example was the lawyer for the railroads who becomes attorney general in the midst of all the railroad strikes. And he is then, as attorney general, deploying both court orders and the U.S. Army against striking rail workers. So
just to update it today, literally today, when we see, the general counsel for Uber becoming, getting into the administration, or when we see, the Clintons and the Trumps at a wedding, 8 years ago or whatever it is, that they're best friends. These are all parts of this type of interlocking. It's funny because Matt, our producer, has me watching The Last Kingdom, and it's just reminiscent of,
yeah.
Here's we're gonna I'm going to take this, my daughter is going to marry your son, and boom, that's the way that we're going to create these networks. On some level, that's still,
and it's power and resources. So yes, and I think obviously the Trump administration was, kind of took this to a breathtaking extreme, but I'm glad that you bring in all of the Democratic Party examples. The other one is the nominee to be Secretary of Agriculture, who comes straight out of Big Dairy. So that means we're not going to be changing the subsidy formula to benefit actual small farmers and actual regenerative agriculture. It means that the giants, the Tysons and folks like that, who basically reduce American farmers to indentured servants, are gonna, or even you have John Kerry, who is to be the climate guy in the White House. What was his first stop? What was his first meeting? It was with the oil giants. Why? To find out, quote, what they need and what's possible. Oh, great. So they're the ones who are going to be, it's just the orientation. And another important one I think was Holder and Lanny Brewer,
right,
under Obama in the Department of Justice, who had been representing major banks, or at least they were part of the firm that was
foregone conclusion that there were people who were so important, literally individuals, because of their position, were so important to our economy that we could not jail them in any way. And you do you cite Bill Black in your book, and we used to have him on quite a bit in the wake of the financial crisis. All right, well, let me ask you this, because I want to get to.
Can I just sorry to interrupt you, but just to bring forward the purposeful aspect of this. You mentioned the Powell memo. I want to say that where we are currently now is also quite clearly the result of a deliberate campaign whose blueprint was written by Lewis Powell, who went on to become a Supreme Court justice. And in fact, as part of the memo, he basically instructed the Chamber of Commerce how to bring cases that he could, decide in favor of big businesses. But big businesses, that's too abstract. As you suggest, they're individuals. We're talking business executives. Businesses have no agency themselves. We're talking the executives of major businesses. And he laid out quite a detailed formula that involved taking over parts of universities. It involved creating something like the Federalist Society, which busied itself in peopling, the benches of federal courts. It also, part of that blueprint, frankly, was disinformation campaigns, starting with sugar, about how, fat is much worse for us than sugar is. Turns out sugar's just as bad. Tobacco, and then opioids. So a lot of the processes that we've seen playing out were really quite precisely mapped out and then executed by a network, partly of people who are considered off-center libertarians like the Koch brothers, but also by blue chip companies in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce across the political divide.
Let me ask you this. Why is the critique not one of capitalism per se?
Because capitalism, the shape of capitalism depends on the rules. I am a resident of France. France is a capitalist country. However, it is a much more equal country. And there's plenty of corruption in France too. And one could argue that there, to some aspects of it are systemic. But the outcomes for ordinary people are a lot better in France than they are here, including education, including healthcare, including basically leisure to be a human being, including the quality of the food they eat, including environmental impact, you kind of name it. They export a lot of their corruption. But what I'm saying is that capitalism, that's a very general, I don't even know what capitalism means, frankly, because there are so many sub-rules that define the shape of capitalism and that existed in a certain way, between about 1935 and about 1980 in the United States, and then were deliberately dismantled. So was America a capitalist country in 1950? Is it a capitalist country today? Well, I think the answer would be yes in both cases, but arguably in 1950, or let's say 1970, that capitalism as constrained by, for example, robust antitrust enforcement, the beginnings of environmental and consumer protections, expanding rights and public space for previously disadvantaged groups, that trajectory under capitalism was a much more, I think, beneficial to everybody trajectory than the one we're on now.
Can you have this level, this specific problem of this type of corruption, like reaching this level where it becomes almost a different thing than the sort of the petty corruption in the context of what you would perceive a socialist country?
Sure. This is the problem, is that, and this is what I really discovered frighteningly as I looked at the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age phenomenon, which was acute systemic corruption, was almost identical, not only under both political parties in the United States, but under every different political system that existed in the industrialized world. So you had it in Imperial Germany, you had it in the French Republic, which is arguably, not officially socialist, but certainly more socialist. In fact, you had better social legislation in Imperial Germany than you did in the United States. And you had it in the British monarchy, constitutional monarchy, and in the United States. And so the problem is, I don't think there's any system that intrinsically in and of itself can protect against systemic corruption. It means it's sort of like what Benjamin Franklin is supposed to have said upon departing the Constitutional Convention. What are you doing in there? What are you making in there? A republic, madam, if you can keep it.
Right.
The responsibility for retaining integrity in public life and a government in the public interest lies with us. Lies with all of us. And what I have also found interesting is how effectively kleptocratic networks secure enablers. Now, they're the for-profit facilitators like real estate agents and law firms and stuff like that. But I mean the enablers. I mean the comfortable people with $150,000 salaries in universities and think tanks and stuff like that who take money from these from arguably corrupt institutions and individuals. And, they continue to write boring papers about corruption that no one's going to read. And, they check the boxes, but fundamentally, they are not going to upset the apple cart. And more than that, they don't even understand how this works. So I often get pushback on this description of networks from people that I would expect to, greet this analysis favorably. But it's much more comfortable for them to think that what is the current state of the political economy in the United States is the result, number one, of, impersonal economic forces and, quote, the hurly-burly of politics, or some evil other party, that, okay, all the evil is on the other side of the aisle. Those three narratives are comfortable. The narrative that, no, networks of nameable individuals mounted a deliberate campaign to get us here, and oh, by the way, your salary, you're kind of in receipt of stolen goods because your comfortable salary or mine in the past, was somewhat predicated on this business model, including philanthropy, where philanthropy is not only image laundering, it's also a way of silencing those who get the money.
Right. And we've talked quite a bit about that in terms of the nature of philanthropy and how problematic it is in that respect. So we don't have too much time. I wanted to talk to we just saw Donald Trump's corruption in terms of, let's say, just the election, and how this aggregates on some level. The idea that Hakeem Jeffries, number 3 in the Democratic caucus, the other day said, we're not going to look backwards. We're only going to look forwards. And to me, that just sort of feels like, that Petri dish, we're just going to put a little bit more moisture in there and not deal with that. And we're just going to go forward. Meanwhile, the Petri dish, it develops, I don't know science well enough to know, but things grow.
Something grows.
And
something grows.
But so with that understanding and the end of your book, or I should say, or close to it, what has to happen? Because in the past, it has been multiple world wars and a historical depression that created the social cohesion that allowed for the crushing of those corruptive networks. Do we need to wait for that? Or I'm not saying wait's probably the wrong word, but is that what it's going to take?
This was what sent my hair straight up on end as I was doing the research, is we are on such a similar trajectory to the extended Gilded Age, to the United States in the very late 19th and early 20th centuries. And like us today, they had a series of calamities. So have we. We had the savings and loan crisis, and then we had the dot-com crisis, and then we had, the wars, and then we had 2008. And, so it's like this dirge. And as you say, it took 2 world wars, that's 2 genocides, mass starvation in Europe, a pandemic, like 10 times the size of this one, the nuclear bomb, and a worldwide depression. And so for me, the urgency of the message that I'm trying to put out is, can't we find that solidarity? Is that the word you used?
Cohesion.
Cohesion in the fight to ward off that level of calamity. Can we find almost the same level of cohesion that you would living through a calamity and apply it to the fight to ward them off? For the moment, I have to be honest, I don't see it. And largely, I see that we are still way more activated by any issue that touches on an identity grouping, be it our gender, be it our race, be it our national origin. Those are the issues that get people out into the street. I don't see us doing a good job of creating a cross-cutting coalition that will hold our own elected officials to account and will demand the specific types of reforms. So both prosecution, and I agree with your suggestion that if people are not punished, there's no line in the sand anymore. It doesn't matter what laws you have in the books if people aren't punished for violating them. So sorry that it would have to be an administration of a given party, but then hold people of the other party to the same standards. People need to get punished. We need to call for it. But I think there's a lot we can do in our everyday lives that has to do with, for example, buying local, break up the monopolies ourselves. Anyway, as you say, I have an epilogue that is full of things that people can do, because I think it's going to take all of us with all of our different gifts in this fight to the hilt.
Sarah Chayes, the book is On Corruption in America, What's at Stake. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. Be right back. Finish up the program. We're back. So, folks, Georgia tonight, obviously, is the on everybody's mind. Is that a song?
Georgia on My Mind by Ray Charles. Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head.
Look at that. Wow, I had no idea. It just occurred to me as I said that. It really is a big deal. And I suspect there are places where you can still make phone calls. I think I tweeted out something yesterday, so folks can check my Twitter feed for that if you want to make some last-minute phone calls. And I suspect we will also know the results, unless it's super, super close, which it could be, by, I don't know, 8, 9 p.m. tonight. But it could be one of those things that drags out for a couple of days. We will be here tomorrow to talk about it, and Em and I will be we'll hop on maybe tonight. Tonight on a little live stream just to recap it. Until then, we will see you tomorrow, unless, of course, you are staying with us. And remember, you can also, if you missed any part of this show today, you can always see it on the Peacock app, on the Choice channel on the Peacock app, 5 p.m., 10 p.m. We run this specific program. And then you can also go back a couple of days, and if you just search Seder or Majority Report, I think you should be fine there. But interesting, I just found that fascinating.
Great interview.
Yeah. And, I should say we just got an IM, and I'll just read this, and I'm not going to read any other IMs in this part of the show. But Sweater Vest Daddy says it doesn't matter how much you root corruption out of capitalism. The effects of capitalism, being the upward redistribution of wealth, will always just breed more corruption because money is power under capitalism. And I think you'd have to. I think there are other. I think that is true, but I don't know. I mean, I guess from the perspective from her perspective, that it is money that exclusively that in our society creates status and power, and therefore breeds corruption in that way. But in other systems, you can be greedy for that power. And I think I am of the mind, and I think this is, I am of the mind that this form of greed exists either for money, which brings you power, and or for just other things that give you power within a context of a society. I mean, I think this level of
the will to power has been marked before capitalism existed.
Exactly. And that's what I found interesting about her starting in Anatolia, and ancient
right.
The Persian antiquity, etc. So, folks, just a reminder: it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. It is our members who really, keep the show trucking along. Also, subscribe to our YouTube thing now that we got 1 million. We probably won't push it again until we get up to like 2 million. So 10 years, maybe another 10 years. But subscribe, have me, emphasize that and encourage that for the next decade or so. Yes. Also, check out the AM Quickie. You can find it at amquickie.com. Great way to get 7 minutes of news. It's in your, you can find it on your podcast server, or you can find it on YouTube. That could be Sam from Vermont says, great interview, Sam. Save that one for the year's beat of.
And then corrected himself twice. Best of.
Oh, best of. There you go.
Saved,
okay.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Unfortunate. Almost unfortunate.
Nomi, are you there?
I'm here. Hang on. Can't control this thing, can we? When are we ever going to become experts at Zoom? That's what I want to know. All right. Hi. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Nomi.
Seamless.
There you go. Yes. What's happening today on your show?
We have an incredible show. It's our first show back from New Year's. For our panel, we have Joshua Kahn Russell and Napoleon de Legend. And for our main interview, we have Grafton Tanner, who's the author of The Circle of the Snake, Nostalgia and Utopia in the Age of Big Tech, which is, I think, extremely relevant for the moment that we're living in, with Google unionizing and the insanity online. So I'm excited. And of course, our book club just started. So go check out our book club at patreon.com/The Nomi Key Show. We are well into our first book. Did our first interview with Harvey K. It is the story of Thomas Paine. It's a fascinating book. Like, it blew me away to hear his track from, he came to America when he was 37 years old, and within 2 years called for a revolution, which happened, of course. So it's an amazing life story.
That's pretty good. 24 months. Folks, don't forget.
Not 2 weeks. Sorry.
Patreon.com/The Antifada. You can check out also The Antifada is doing now. Jamie's got two Twitch streams. I think it's on Wednesday and Friday nights, but you can check it out at twitch.tv/The Antifada. What else Matt, what's happening on the Matt Leck media empire?
Yeah, Left Reckoning leaves soft launch mode on Thursday night, so look forward to that at 7 Eastern on YouTube, Left Reckoning Twitch or YouTube feed. And also, I'm going to be Twitch streaming tonight, but check my Twitter feed to figure out if it's going to be on Left Reckoning or Literary Hangover. And also, there's a new Literary Hangover episode over break, so check that out, folks.
Wow, geez, Matt giving us competition.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Noted. All right, folks, we're going to head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. We'll see you in the fun half.
It might take a...
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh. Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Kate from KC asks, any chance you'll have Bill Black on the show anytime soon? You know, I had forgotten about Bill Black a little bit, and that's something I'm going to try and do this year. But let's go first to the phones. Calling from a 210, I think, if I am not mistaken, this call must be from the San Antonio area. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Good afternoon, Sam, Emma, and Nomiki.
Good afternoon, John.
Yeah, so Sam, I know you like your bellwether county, so I'm going to give you one when you're addressing the...
Let's just be clear. Hold on one second, John. We should say that you're talking about Georgia.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Extremely important Senate elections in Georgia that will determine who controls the Senate. though many analysts say that running up the totals and where each party is strong is more important than flipping counties. Baldwin County is 2 counties northeast of Macon, where Biden won by 1.2 and Perdue won by 0.5% in November. So if Ossoff and Warnock can win that county, it could be an indication of that they could win statewide. So Georgia is the only state in the nation that has a primary system for each party, but to win you have to receive a majority in both the primary and in the general election, while all other states you can win with just a plurality in the general. This odd arrangement was put in place to keep black candidates from winning in a large field of candidates and preserve their white representation. But ironically, if Georgia would have had elected their senators with a plurality in the general, David Perdue would have already won because he beat Ossoff by 1.8% in November. So after the 2016 elections, Republicans controlled 10 out of 14 House seats in Georgia. In the 2016 election, in the 6th District, Republican Tom Price won by 23.4 points and was appointed to Secretary of Housing and Human Services, but was forced out in September of 2017 over the use of taxpayer money for private airline charter service. Trump only won the district by 1.5, and the election to replace Price captured the public interest like few House special elections have in my lifetime. Although John Ossoff lost to Karen Handel by 3.6%, the election showed that the north central Atlanta suburbs could turn blue in future elections. And so in 2008 and 18, Democrat Lucy McBath lost her son to racist violence, but the incumbent Karen Handel won by 1 point and beat the incumbent Karen Handel by 1 point. In November of this year, McBath won by 9.2 points. In the 7th District, which covers the northeast suburbs of Atlanta, a similar pattern happened to 2016. Republican Rob Woodall won by 20.7, but in 2018 he won by 419 votes. And this year, Democrat Caroline Boudreaux won by 2.7. So I hope Nabila Islam, a great progressive who ran last year in this district and almost made the Democratic primary runoff, primaries of Boudreaux in 2022. So Joe Biden outperformed Ossoff in 13 of the 14 congressional districts. But the 2 biggest margins were in the 6th District, where Biden won by 11.3, while Ossoff only won by 5.1. In the 7th District, where Biden won by 6.3, while Ossoff only won by 2.8. These are the 2 districts where Ossoff and Warnock can pick up a lot of votes if they hit Biden's numbers. The early vote total has been very good for the Democrats. Experts speculate that they have anywhere from a 9 to 13 point lead in the early vote, with the vote total ranging vote lead from 280,000 to 350. Of course, it's impossible to say how much of a lead they are. Though what we do know from the demographics is we know, where the votes are, geographically, the sex and the age of the voter, the ethnic background, and whether they voted early or by mail, or in last November, or whether they voted at all. Currently, 123,000 have voted early that didn't vote in November. This includes 46,000 black voters that skew towards younger voters. While the 3 top congressional districts who have had the highest vote totals are all from districts in Atlanta or the suburbs of Atlanta. The 2nd District, which represents the southwest portion of the state, also has had excellent voter turnout. The final vote totals are slightly under 5 million in the presidential race. So far, there have been 3,093,000 early votes, though I've seen one press report where it's a little bit higher. The election day percentage from November is 19.5 of all total votes cast, or slightly under 1 million votes. Various experts have proclaimed that election day turnout would have to equal the election day turnout in November, which I'm very skeptical that will happen. Polling has tightened up in the last week. Right now I have Warnock winning by 1.2 and Ossoff winning by 1.3 in November. I predicted that Ossoff would win by 1.2 in the runoff in my pinned tweet. Now, how much do you think the 2 big stories of the holiday break, the possibility of a great number of people receiving $2,000 checks, and Trump telling Republicans that this is an illegal, invalid election will affect turnout. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to address them.
I mean, I think those two big stories, are going to affect things at the margin, and I have a feeling that the margin is going to be really important.
I was talking to someone in Georgia over the weekend, just trying to get a sense of what was happening on the ground, and major shout outs to, I'm glad you mentioned John Nabila. She has her organization, Save Our State, SOS. And Ben Dixon's been doing great work on the ground. Marcus Farrell, lots of folks have been doing exceptional work outside of the national figures. But I asked, I was like, how close is this? And this really struck me, and I'd love to find the data on this, but coming from the ground, I trust the data. 25% of the Georgia Republican Party does not believe the election results were valid. And I think because of this disinformation campaign that's been pushed out there, it might work to the Democrats' advantage. I'm curious how much that's going to affect the election, given that there's this active effort to take it to Kelly Loeffler, and you know what I mean? It's bizarro land right now. It's total bizarro land.
Put it this way, right? I mean, this is my feeling on this. It has to mean something. Now, the question is, it's the only thing I feel confident is that the impact is less than zero, or is greater than zero, right? And so if it's greater than zero, it really just a function of everything else. We just don't know, right? I mean, I can't imagine it's going to be overwhelming. I just think that most people probably are not engaged, highly engaged in it, but we don't, I mean, from my perspective, how many people do we need to really be influenced by the $2,000 checks, and at the same time the idea that they're alienated? 5,000, 10,000 for it to make a difference? I mean, that seems to me to be not really that crazy of an idea. It's just a question of how close it's going to be and who has mobilized. And I don't know. I think, my sense is that there's no reason why the Democrats won't have the same apparatus in place that they had before. And I just think that the Republicans are probably caught a little flat-footed in terms of just driving turnout.
The issue might just be if the $2,000 check issue is a bit muddled, right? I mean, I think paired with Trump kind of depressing turnout in his own bizarre way, is there enough messaging, or was there enough time, and was the Democratic Party cohesive enough to come out with a, this is Mitch McConnell, he's the one that blocked these checks? Because a lot of people might say Trump's the one that blew up the bill so that we could get the $2,000 checks or whatever. I mean, that's my one caveat. I agree that everything's trending in the right direction.
Biden's rally was in the afternoon, wasn't it? I mean, I got to think that the 6 p.m., and I don't know this, and maybe somebody from Georgia can call in, but I got to think that the 6 p.m. news started off with Joe Biden saying,
right,
if you want $2,000, vote for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the runoff is today. The runoff is today, and that happened.
Well, yes, that did happen. But I think the idea is that this is for people, that pitch is for people who are not voting early. Yeah. Because people who are voting early, they are doing so because they already know who they're going to vote for.
I agree with you. I'm just throwing out potential issues that could arise.
I agree.
We don't know what's going to happen, right?
But I think the apparatus is a really good point, though. I mean, the Republican apparatus in Georgia has been breaking apart because there's an actual split in the Republican Party. I mean, even folks who've been extremely supportive of Donald Trump up until now are breaking away from him. And so there's so much division at a moment where they need to unify and get their troops on the ground and really focus on turnout. And they're relying on these outside media campaigns from dark money groups to basically just lie over the airwaves. And meanwhile, the Democrats, I mean, the national Democrats is one thing, Biden coming in, Obama coming in, that's great. But the Democrats on the ground and the independent groups were like, we're not relying on Democrats because we've been here before. And that's what they've continuously done for the last few cycles. And that kind of stuff pays off. And it definitely pays off in a special election when it comes to, running up against a well-organized Republican Party, which it is not.
And I also think there's one other element, and this was, I read that piece in the USA Today by who was the football player that.
Well, I forget now.
Tito, I can't.
Manti Te'o?
Yeah, no, it was Manti Te'o's girlfriend.
I can't remember his name.
Okay.
But, Emma was supposed to remember. But,
sports correspondent, come on.
What did I get paid for? Right?
But the idea was that Stacey Abrams, I think he probably, well, I don't know if he undersells it, but I think that he's making the point that that Stacey Abrams coming so close, and arguably, there were other issues, but leaving that aside, the success that Stacey Abrams had, even though she didn't win in that instance, inspired voters, African-American voters, maybe ones who were rural, that, hey, wait a second, because they had grown up probably with this notion of it's not possible for you to have any political power in Georgia. And therefore, why bother? But that Stacey Abrams, her success basically said to them hey, wait a second, this is within reach. There was a similar dynamic when Obama, ran in 2008. It wasn't until he won in Iowa that African-American voters sort of lined up behind him, because prior to that, they were like, there's no way a black guy is going to win in America. This is happening at that time. And on some level, Stacey Abrams could have had a similar impact on African-American voters who felt like there's no way, we can win, that we can express any type of political power in this, and that we saw the impact of that in 2020, and that just what happened in 2020, which was, Joe Biden wins, also adds to that sort of sense of hey, wait a second, I can take this trip to the, voting booth, and
it inspired people to do more on the ground work, very targeted work. I mentioned Nabila's group because it's specifically focused on Gwinnett County, which was critical in the Joe Biden election, and is a majority minority district with a large immigrant in their communities to launch their own efforts and raise money on their own very quickly, by the way, to do this work. And so it's like it goes hand in hand. It inspired voters and it inspired organizers.
And that's some of the complex dynamics behind non-voters, right? So you hear a lot of times people talking about how, they're very privileged. If you don't vote for a Democrat, you're privileged, right? That's a lot of the argument you hear online. I do believe you vote for the lesser evil every time, but when you look at the data, it's often people of color, people of lower income status disproportionately because of the dynamics we're talking about here. A lot of times, Black voters especially have been pushed out of the process, and they have been told, at least implicitly, you can't win. And so what Georgia did was it allowed people to believe they could win, and then sparked all that organizing that you're talking about. And we talked about this. It might have been off air, Sam, or it might have been on air. That's what Charles Booker's run could have done in Kentucky and didn't, and McGrath's run did not do.
Right. You're actually building something rather than something that's completely ephemeral.
Well, what's so sorry, Sam, what's so interesting about this is, we arguably lost the South for 2-3 generations. And we have an opportunity to say, well, it's not that, did we ever really lose the South? Or was it just that we lost the South the white Southern Democrats who are racist? And we just never said, well, what about the other Democrats that exist that are just as much, if not more, of our voting base? And it's kind of offensive that is the legacy of the Democratic Party, which is Joe Biden's Democratic Party of the late 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s into 90s. And I think this new Democratic Party, that is why it's so important to have voices that are like Charles Booker's, is they're like, no, I've grown up here. This has always been the way it is. You just didn't value us as voters.
Yes, and also there's demographic changes. The sheer numbers are also,
some of it,
yeah, and particularly, there's a big Latino vote in Georgia as well. That the organizing there is going to be hugely important. too. All right. So, John, so let me just get this straight. I'm looking tonight at Baldwin County and the 6th and 7th congressional districts. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it's probably going to be hard to measure the 6th and the 7th congressional districts because Ossoff won both of those.
So just Baldwin County.
So I'd look more at Baldwin County, but
all right.
Yeah, also like I said, it's just it's running up scores. Ossoff was usually about 2 points behind Biden almost everywhere in the state. And so he just needs to bring that total up or, if the Republicans just don't turn out, from what I've seen in polling is that, the hardcore Republican voters who vote in every election, they're going to turn out. They weren't turned off by Trump. But all the low propensity who, turned out, Georgia was at 66.7%. Percent as far as, which is higher than the national average as far as VP voting eligible population. That they may not turn out. I think it was like they were 5 points behind.
That's the thing is that I could come up with a theory either way, right? I can come up with a theory of like those type of Republicans came out, they voted against Trump, they split their ballot because they're Republicans. And they went out, they voted for Biden. They're just low propensity Republican voters. I'm going to vote against Trump, but I'm going to vote Republican the rest of the ticket. Those are people who just might say like, you know what? I'm not going. Or they might. I don't know.
Right. Luckily we'll know a lot more information.
John, as always, a real pleasure to talk to you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. I love being on Tuesdays because Tuesdays are always election days and John always calls in. So fun.
Right. I always we'll get into it and then the caller's still on the phone, just listening away.
478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is Jeff in Georgia.
Jeff in Georgia. Happy New Year.
Oh, yay.
I should have said Happy New Year to John, too. I forgot. And he didn't even seem interested in hearing a salutation. You went right into it.
I know.
But Happy New Year, Jeff. I hope you're feeling better.
I am feeling great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much to the community and everyone. I feel fantastic.
Your phone doesn't sound so great.
Oh, no. I'm so sorry. Let me try to go somewhere else. Maybe I'll sound better.
No, are you on a headphone or something like that? Headset?
Nope. Sure am not. That's amateur shit, man.
Okay. All right. Well, if you speak a lot loudly, we can hear you. So
I'll try to speak up and talk. I really enjoyed John's call. I don't disagree with any of it. I wanted to not talk so much about polls. I'm maybe a little less hopeful than him. I don't know what's going to happen today, but I will say that it definitely feels to me as if the Republicans are running scared. They're campaigning scared. Their ad blitzes are scared. But basically, what they seem to settle on is sending every white voter in the state the scariest stuff they can about Raphael Warnock, and that is basically their strategy. That's what it feels like to me. I do think we have a chance today. I think that's really only about 2 reconciliation bills, basically, in the Senate, which is pretty sad stuff. I don't know if you think I'm right about that or not, and I don't think that's nothing, and I definitely voted today. But I don't think that a couple of reconciliation bills getting through the Senate is basically what this is all about.
I think that's true. I think, although it also, look, I think it's about a couple of real reconciliation bills. I find it hard to believe that with a 50-person Senate, they're going to get rid of the filibuster. So there's going to be obstruction. It also means judges, which I think is really important. And in some respects, because they won't be able to get anything else, there may be the proper attention placed on judges that the Obama administration did not do. And, I think that is pretty huge. I think the idea that that Biden's going to be able to set up his cabinet quickly is going to be helpful to the country. Like, and I think they are going to use COVID, and I don't think that they're mistaken in doing this. I don't think this is cynical at all, frankly. I think they need to. I think they're going to use COVID as a mechanism in which to just hugely spend a lot of money. Like, I think there's going to be I think they're going to go. I get the sense that on day one, and if Joe Biden doesn't have to worry about a protracted assembly of his cabinet, that these people can go through more or less, rather quickly, because I'm also convinced that if any of these people get shut down, their replacement is going to be someone less to our liking from, a progressive left perspective, that they're going to do stuff like Defense Production Act to get vaccines out there. They're going to do it.
They have to.
They're going to do stuff like we're going to train and hire 50,000, 75,000, 25,000. I don't know what the number is, people to go out and learn how to give shots. And they're going to do it. I think this is going to be, I think they're going to have a federal system for doing vaccinations. And I think like this, I think that's going to be pretty big. And I think they're going to roll in stuff like, infrastructure. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff. I don't think it's going to be, we're not going to herald, he's not going to be the next FDR, and we're not going to get Medicare for all under him. But I think that, like, as a lot of these fights, we're not, as if we don't have to fight these fights, there are better fights that we can have as, on the left.
Sam, remember when Obamacare, the infrastructure, I forgot what the name of the act was, where they were allocating money to localities and states. And of course, the Republican localities were choosing how to use the projects to build the roads if they used it properly. And there was a lot of mismanagement of funds. Do you remember this in 2009? What was the restaurant? What was the act called?
I don't know. Part of the stimulus.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of it though. But there was a lot of controversy about it, rightfully so, that the money was not being allocated properly. And so I'm curious. Do you remember this?
I can't remember. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm curious. I'm hoping that they're going to learn the lessons from 2008, because there was a lot of, it could have been, everything with the stimulus could have been done so much better. But because of the health crisis, I really do believe, and I think some of this might be Ron Klain's kind of role in all of this, because he has managed crises like this and he has managed pandemics before. I really, really hope that this is more aggressive, and it really does come from a federal level, not like a trickle down to states, because we're seeing what's happening right now. I mean, I was reading an article someone sent to me the other day about, I forgot what it was, the smallpox vaccinations that were distributed in New York City, when New York City had exactly the same population size, 8 million people, and 6 million New Yorkers were given the smallpox vaccination within a month.
Yep. Yeah, it can be done. It can be done.
Did that enrich hospitals, private hospitals?
Well, no. That's. I mean, that's a Cuomo problem, and it's one thing. What needs to happen is there's a Defense Production Act. So New York is not dealing with a couple 100,000 or whatever it is doses of the vaccine, but rather the federal government says, Here's 7 million doses of the vaccine, and this is how it's going to be distributed. We have already set up a federal program through your county health departments, and that's the way this is going to go, because on day one, they know what to do. We just flick a switch and they go into mode, right? The drill alarm goes off. So I think, I think it's easy. Well, I don't know if it's easy, not in these parts, to assume that if they get the Senate, great things are going to happen. But I'm thinking in terms of this, is that like the corollary, I guess, second time I've said that or attempted to say that word today, to the idea that there was a lot of fights that we couldn't fight on the left because we were dealing with the bonfire that was the Trump administration, right? Because
that's what made a bunch of lesser liberals ally with never Trumpers, right? Like it was that important, and that's how big the coalition got. It was great. We loved it.
Yeah, but in this instance, if the attention is not like how are we going to seat an education secretary, right? But rather like what Joe Biden now is going to do with his executive authority, because it's clear that even with 50 senators, there's only so much that's going to happen. Those are the fights we want. We want all the sort of like, the bunting and the hitting and the catching. We want that stuff to be not an issue. Get your cabinet in there. You have no excuses. Now do this, and this. And then, that's my attitude of what the value of what's going to happen. And then, of course, there is some material value as well, particularly like with those reconciliation bills. I mean, up front and the judges. So this is a big deal. It is a big deal. And all I can say, Jeff, is if I remember correctly, you didn't think that Joe Biden was going to win Georgia, did you?
I did not. And in that vein, like I actually only have like two more quick things for you.
And Barrett Home too has one more thing: the Senate committees, and that makes a big deal too, as to like how who's going to chair these committees, and Bernie going to be the chair of the banking committee, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big this has the opportunity to be a big deal.
I did want to tell you that I am a little worried that. Actually, I would say Ossoff and Warnock themselves and their campaigns, follow them because I'm politically engaged. I'm like, the vast majority of the American populace, including in Georgia, they have been banging the idea, hey, you want money? Vote for me. Like yes. I have not. I don't know that this idea has really permeated the less politically engaged people in Georgia that I talk to. It hasn't really been picked up, the national or the local press, I'd say.
Really?
And I have my suspicions because those companies, they're run by board of directors, and I think they have a problem with giving that much money to people that quickly because it means the labor force is less disciplined. I mean, I know I sound a little bit orthodox Marxist right now, but that's sort of how I see it. For whatever reason,
Alan Greenspan got out in front of Senate committee years ago and said part of our job is to maintain a certain amount of insecurity amongst the workforce, and that's what you're talking about. And
yeah, basically. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, Sam, but if the results are close tonight, my advice to you and to everyone really is to not necessarily trust what you hear the Secretary of State say about how many votes there are left to count and when they'll be counted, because he has been proven to be full of shit on this more than once. And I got burned last time, and I'm still saucy about it personally, if you can't tell. So if it is close, like just keep in mind that our Secretary of State is a scumbag and is bad at his job. And so don't listen to him necessarily if he tells you something about the vote count.
That's right. We have actually, I appreciate the call, Jeff.
In my notes all right.
Happy New Year.
I appreciate it.
Happy New Year.
We should say, keep this in mind. We're going to play a clip from him. We're going to play a clip from him right now.
Let's do that. Oh, what a transition.
Yes.
I love it.
He is still not your friend. Let's just put it this way. He is not your friend. However, this is, anything that is in any way going to inhibit the ability of Purdue and Loeffler to win, is going to bring a smile to my face. And I think that may do it. What is this clip, Brendan? Which number is it? I can't see.
It's number 4.
Number 4. All right, play this clip. This is Martha McCallum on with Brett Raffensperger, who coming off of that really sort of uncomfortable phone call where he had to explain to the president, nope, sorry, bud, you did not win.
Try to shrug off his extortion.
Exactly.
That if you listen to that tape, you'll believe that President Trump's big focus is not tomorrow. It's actually Wednesday, January 6th.
Well, I mean, that may be what his focus is, and we're going to learn more when we see him at the rally this evening. But I just want to ask you once again to respond specifically to Senator Perdue, who said that he thought it was inappropriate and disgusting to release this audio. How do you respond to him on that charge?
Senator Perdue still owes my wife an apology for all the death threats she got after he asked for my resignation. And I've not heard one peep from that man since. If he wants to call me face-to-face, man-to-man, I'll talk to him off the record. But he hasn't done that.
So do you think, it feels like this is very much about a grudge and between you and the president and between you and Mr. Perdue?
Martha, it's really about getting the facts out. Because we just did a press release today. President Trump probably had 8 to 10 points. Every one of his numbers were wrong. And we have a poster board of all the different numbers, the actual numbers, the real numbers that we have versus what they have. And our numbers will be supported in a court of law. Their numbers will not be.
I mean, first off, it sure sounds like a grudge to me. Yeah. He was not going to release that tape until Trump mischaracterized what was said in that conversation on Twitter. So he was absolutely fine with not releasing that. And it sure sounds like a grudge to me.
Posterity, right? Because Trump was going to go on Twitter or tell people.
Well, had. In fact, there was a tweet that Raffensperger had where he quote tweeted what Trump had said and said, the truth is going to come out. And then boom. And when the answer to it was gross of you to release that tape, which I think is silly, and he says, this dude, got my family death threats. Yeah, that's a grudge. And you know what?
I don't even think it's a grudge per se, as it is trying to expose the bullshit that was happening to folks who might kind of be on the fence, in the Trump Republican world, and realizing how egregious this is. Obviously, the people sending death threats are going to do the death threat thing, but it's like minimizing their little echo chamber, trying to bring a little bit of sanity, bringing them back. Yes, there's a grudge, but we've all been in smear campaigns and we want to expose it and show everybody they're full of shit.
Yes. But Raffensperger, I'm saying that this guy's not doing this for some higher principle of justice or something like that. He's doing it because they messed with him and he's going to mess with them back. And I'm just saying this. I'm here for it. As far as I'm concerned, put them both into a cage match, but also put in some lions and tigers and some snakes so that nobody comes out as far as I'm concerned. Metaphorically.
Can he train the Democrats before he does that? Because that's the kind of energy we need in the Democratic Party.
I mean, the point is that I'm reminded of the Ted Cruz wife thing where Trump tweeted that photo of Ted Cruz's wife and called her ugly, right? Wives get involved and Republican husbands cave to the other Republicans and don't really stand up for their wives at all. I mean, that's what happened with Ted Cruz. Look at him. He's pretending that there's any legitimacy to Trump's claims and bowed and bent the knee to Trump. So
and his dad. Remember his dad, the attacks on him?
Okay. And I don't doubt that Raffensperger and Perdue will make up. If Perdue is back in power, they will come back and be cohesive. But the important and great thing for right now, heading into the runoffs, is that they aren't cohesive.
Yeah. And I would say that it's interesting because Raffensperger is providing a great example of how conservatives find sort of ethics and justice when they are somehow victimized by something that they otherwise wouldn't have a problem of. We have another example of that at least from a policy perspective. We've seen this in the past, right? It was Portman, his son. I think it was a Portman. He came out for marriage equality. Who was it that?
It was Rob Portman.
Rob Portman came out for marriage equality when I think because his son was gay or he found out about it or something like that. We have, over the years, we've had so many examples of conservatives seeing the light on a very narrow, specific issue because they've been through it. It is, I think, part of a problem that conservatives have with the concept of empathy. But I'm not a psychiatrist or any type of clinician. But this keeps happening. And here is another example of it. It is Meghan McCain coming back onto the View she's had an epiphany.
Yeah, when I gave birth, I actually had postnatal preeclampsia, and I was in the hospital for a week after on a magnesium drip, and it really, really kicked my butt. And I was planning on coming back to the show for the election in 6 weeks after I gave birth, and I was physically unable to. I was physically unable to come. I was having, as any woman who has experienced anything like that, I had to have my husband and my mother-in-law help me do everything from shower to eat. It was deeply humbling, and to help me take care of Liberty. And the whole time I was thinking what a privilege it is to have this kind of maternity leave. And then as I thought about it, the more angry I got.
Was it? They named their kid
Liberty.
Yes.
Next kid's named Reagan.
Okay.
My kid's going to be named CIA, guys.
Yeah.
Is it Liberty McCain or Liberty Dominic?
Neither.
Liberty McCain Dominic.
I mean, he'd be
That's a little too liberal, guys. Come on.
I think I think the next kid's got to be Freedom, right, or something like that, or
but he's got to honor the hero that is her father by taking the last name. That's how he could get around it. Maybe.
It's Maverick McCain is next. Gotta be.
Oh, that's it. You're right.
Could be good. Third kid could be Invisible Hand.
Just needs to be.
But let's go. Let's continue. I'm sorry, we had to stop.
We have an office pool.
Stop.
Okay, cool.
And the whole time I was thinking what a privilege it is to have this kind of maternity leave. And then as I thought about it, the more angry I got that there weren't women in the rest of America that had the same kind of luxury that I had working here at The View. And then I started getting more and more angry that conservatives in particular, given that we are the party of family values, and that everything about our ideology sort of stems from the nucleus of the family, that we are leaving women in this country without the capacity and ability, unless you have an employer that allows you to take care of your child, to heal physically, which is something that needs to happen. And I actually think there's a lot of synergy right now for a paid family leave coming from Democrats and Republicans. Everyone from Marco Rubio and Kristen Sinema and Joni Ernst have come on board. And I think this is something that's really a really dark spot for our country. We are the only developing nation that doesn't supply women with paid family leave. And if we're going to continue growing as a country, and we're going to be able to give women and families the capacity to grow in the way that we want, and stop having this sort of societal fracture that we're having, and a lot of arguments are made it's because of the fracture that's happening at home and with families. We as conservatives have to come together and allow all women in this country, no matter where they're from or their socioeconomic class, the capacity to have what I just had, which is 3 months of bonding time and breastfeeding and healing from an emergency C-section, which is what I had to have. And
okay. Now, let me just say there's a couple of things I want to point out. One, it'd be nice also if we had paternity leave. How about just parental leave would be nice. And two, and I have to do this, and I know this is petty, and I know this is childish, but the nucleus of the and the synergy, and you're a developing country.
No. It's the nucleus of the boardroom at Fortune 500 company. Right. That's where the soul of the Republican Party is. I mean, come on, it's so boring, that kind of old school.
I'm going to play neoliberal here for a second.
Go ahead.
I am happy that she's making this case to other conservatives on a network in which you don't hear this often, and I didn't know Kirsten Sinema was for this. I'm surprised, actually. But that is good, and maybe I'm starting to think, is Meghan McCain a neocon or is she a neoliberal? Because I really don't see much daylight between her and Joe Biden at this point, and Kirsten Sinema.
I can answer that for you. She's a hack, and then you can go.
But you can be a neocon and a neoliberal. I mean, a neocon.
I mean, technically neoliberals. Yeah, I know the history of it, but
a neocon and a neoliberal. In fact, I would say that most are. Most neocons are neoliberals.
I think she's attached to the preservation of the Republican Party because of her father, when we all know what her father was in the Republican Party.
Well, also her husband.
Her husband is like,
more conservative, more movement conservative. When she realized, I mean, she is. I think a hack. I think is a very safe way of capturing.
Does she have an ideology except to be the conservative voice on The View and yell over people and get attention for herself, and then drive up her price from the network so that she can stay on? I mean, like, these are the kinds of things that we've seen from her. It's just performative. So I don't even feel the need to dissect her ideology. Naomi's being way more constructive than me, but I cannot stand that conservative impulse. Like, should we just take away her health care? Then maybe she'll understand what it's like not to have health care, and maybe she'll be. This is what Brendan was saying before the show. Let her experience everything. We should put her on in a sea level city in a really hurricane
Bangladesh. Take her to Bangladesh.
How we do it?
Yeah.
You ready? She's the lead in a reality show.
Yes.
It's a reality game show where we set up all of these things that are difficult that she gets to experience so she can come out the other side. And it combines both her desire to be a television
like an
celebrity.
American Ninja Warrior type obstacle.
Right. Well, to be fair, just one more thing. RFK, this was kind of what happened to RFK when he took his poverty tour. It is privilege. It is essentially privilege. And when you have a party full of people who have a lot of privilege and suddenly have to experience something that's really rough, it might wake them up. And that's essentially what's going on in the Republican Party and the half of the Democratic Party.
All right, let's. I think we have on the phone
special guest
calling in from Georgia, Nabila Islam. Nabila, are you on the phone?
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome back to the show. I know that we've spoken in the past. I can't remember if it was on this show or it was on Ring of Fire, but welcome back and thanks for calling in.
Absolutely. I think I don't know what you guys were talking about, but was it about Meghan McCain? And then I heard take her to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
That was me, Nabila. No, me. Hi.
I'm Bengali, and if you take anyone to Bangladesh, they will immediately empathize. Yeah. So, anyways, thanks for letting me speak a little bit about what's going on the ground. I can just tell you guys, just give you a quick overview of what I've been seeing. Is that good?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, so after the general election, we flipped Georgia blue and it was really great. And then everyone said, go back to work. And so we've been busting our asses for the last 2 months. And I'm really proud of the work that Democrats have done on the ground. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. It's truly amazing. The ground game between, everywhere all over Georgia and all the different minority groups. The modeling is showing currently that Democrats are ahead by about 80,000 to 120,000 votes. And there is a strong possibility that we win both Senate seats today if we continue the momentum. Right now, we're seeing lines that are about 1 minute long, 5 minutes long. Most Democrats have early voted, so they've either turned in their ballots or voted in person. And absentee ballot voting is something that is not habitual for Democrats, and it didn't really start until the pandemic, which is why Republicans are keen on changing the rules in this upcoming general session, which is very unfortunate. They don't like people voting. But I think that I don't know yet, but from what I've heard and seen and the rhetoric, traditionally Republicans turn out on election day. And I did see a poll the other day that showed that 55% of Republicans, strong Republicans, were not planning on voting because they thought the election was rigged.
Whoa! How many?
It said, so this is a poll, and again, I'm kind of wary of polls, but it said 55% of strong Republicans were not planning on voting because they thought the election was rigged. Only about a quarter of Republicans in Georgia right now believe that the election was valid. So you have a lot of distrust in the election system right now. And Donald Trump's not helping.
Well, I would say, I mean, it depends on your perspective. I find that very helpful.
He's certainly helping our case, right? I mean, can you talk about the $2,000 check hot button issue? Because, in terms of just, by the way, this is Emma. I think we chatted when I was at TYT, so good to talk to you, Nabila. Yeah. I was wary that maybe, the messaging on the $2,000 checks was so muddled that potentially people aren't sure who to blame, because since it really rests at the feet of McConnell and Trump made such a spectacle of it. Can you talk about how that's resonating with voters in the people on the ground that you've spoken to, who they blame for the lack of the $2,000 checks, and if that's a driving force in this election?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I constantly complain about Democrats is that we suck at messaging.
Yeah.
I will say that I was very impressed with how defined we got during this runoff. And the majority of, I would say, every Democrat I've spoken to blames Republicans. We've done a really good job at branding, Purdue and Loeffler as being, looting from the American people when we needed help. And, they only came on record in supporting, the $2,000 stimulus checks when Donald Trump came on board. But people know that they were being disingenuous. And so, right. And then you heard, President-elect Joe Biden talked about yesterday at the rally. I was there, that we, Purdue and Loeffler are blocking people from being able to receive, this, money in their pockets right now. And, it really resonates with folks. People are angry, and they, especially with Democrats, they're very, I've never seen Democrats so energized in a runoff election, let alone I would say more people are excited. The excitement on the ground is it's a lot more noticeable than it was in the general election. People traditionally go vote for the president, but I think people are just really, really excited about feeling like their votes matter and that it's going to have a consequential impact on their lives.
Nabil, I have a question for you. Have you guys been registering new voters since the election? Have you gotten an uptick of new voters?
So there was, I think that, if I recall this correctly, the voter registration deadline was just mid-December. And people were registering voters. They were registering 17-year-olds that were going to become 18. And so there are 100,000 new voters that have not voted before. That have voted in this runoff election.
Now, wait a second. Hold on for 1 second. Now, there are 100,000 new voters, or there are 100,000, 112,000 who didn't vote in the general election?
You know what? I'm going to double make sure on that. I thought it was folks that did not vote at all. But you could be right, though, that they didn't vote in the general election. I'm just curious as
how that number to me, and I guess it's relatively small, but not, I don't know. That just seems okay. So there, from NBC News, 112,000 voters who did not vote in the 2020 general election voted early or absentee so far. Mm-hmm. So that number could obviously be higher. More people could show up today. It's unclear whether those voters are new voters or just voters who skipped the 2020 general. I would imagine it's a mix, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was newer voters because, how do you explain not voting in the general? That's the thing is that number is mystifying to me. Who are those people?
Well, I think
George is relevant now. Sorry, Nabila, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, look, we are getting this is insane amounts of money is being thrown at Georgia right now, and people are being reached in a way that they've never been reached before. I myself have a PAC called Save Our Senate, where we focus on low propensity voters who are infrequent voters who've missed at least one election in the past 3 elections. And these are folks that usually don't get targeted or messaged to. And we've been knocking on their doors, and we've been asking for their vote. And what we saw was an above 85% support score, which meant that these were Democrats that will vote if you asked for their support. And we've been able to make 7,000 vote plans with new people that probably wouldn't have voted if no one knocked on their door. Wow. I think it's because of the resources that the state is seeing, we've been able to communicate with far more people than we ever have before.
So let me ask you this.
With a lot of repetition.
So let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Is this one of those situations where, I mean, obviously you need to have ongoing contact with these people to keep them engaged on some level. But are we at a point where there's like a critical mass that is reached? Like if you activate people one time for the first time, let's say, like, do they keep their head? Is there a certain momentum that's created that keeps them engaged? Or how much do you need to like be in constant contact essentially with them?
I think you have to continuously keep people engaged in the conversation. You have to give people a reason to vote. You got to keep people inspired. You can't, people get complacent. You have to, constantly remind them of elections and continue messaging to them until they are strong Democrats. And then it is they start habitually voting. Like my parents do. They vote in every election. But with these new voters, it's something that's newer and that they're not, acclimated to. And I think it just takes time. And with our 2022 elections coming up, with the gubernatorial and all the statewide, and Stacey Abrams, running for governor again, I think it's going to keep folks excited, looking forward to something, and keeping them plugged in. I think the infrastructure that Georgia's built in the last just 2 years has been incredible, and I think we're going to be able to keep it up. And we're no longer a flyover state, so people recognize, the potential that Georgia is, and we'll continue. I'm hoping that these resources probably won't be at the extent that they have been during the runoff, but we'll continue to come to Georgia, inside and outside, and help us, cross the finish line when it comes to these critical elections.
Nabila, lastly, did you vote?
Oh yeah, I absolutely. I voted, and I took my parents
twice.
I made a hawk. No, you should check out my TikTok that I made of my mom. But I took my parents to go vote, early vote on the last day of election. So if you guys are listening to this and haven't voted, please, polls close at 7 p.m. Go vote. Take your parents. Text 3 friends. It's so crucial. And thanks for having me on.
Thanks for hey, let me ask you this. Well, I'm sorry. One more last question. And I'm very glad that you said that you voted, because that would be uncomfortable if you hadn't. What time do you think, if results come in tonight, what time do you think they'll come in? Do you have a sense?
So, probably around 10:30. We probably won't. I think this is going to be a close election, and so it's going to probably take a couple of days to count all the absentee ballots, and then there's going to be a little bit. Oh,
they don't count. They don't count. They don't count. They count. They don't start counting until today, or do they count? Have they been counting?
No, they've been counting, but for whatever reason, sometimes on election day, Gwinnett County had some computer some glitch where 25,000 ballots, something happened, and then Fulton County had a water pipe that bursted. So you just never know what happens.
Oh, I know about that water pipe. I mean, the president's been talking about that quite a bit. Yeah, that water pipe. That was very suspicious. And Nabila, thanks so much for calling in. And we got all our fingers crossed.
Thanks, Nabila.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that water main. I mean, the president was spent about 45 minutes on the phone call with the secretary.
Venezuela.
It just disappeared.
At that pipe, obviously. So.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Chavez crawling through the pipes like some sort of impossible move.
Ghost of Chavez. I think I know what your April 1st skit should be this year.
There you go. Let's do some IMs. Tim Pulitzer. I watched Glenn Greenwald interview yesterday where he bemoaned big tech censorship and how anybody going against mainstream narrative was being deranked in the search algorithm. How did I come across this video, you ask? It was the top result in my recommend videos on YouTube, of course. I mean, I will tell you this. I do know that YouTube, if you go search at like you're on your page, the initial page you hit YouTube, or you search in Google for a video on the Georgia election, for instance, what will come up first is CNN, MSNBC, all of the mainstream media outlets. Yeah. Washington Post. That
I'm quite sure wrong.
I'm quite sure they announced that.
He's co-opted it. That's the difference. He's made himself a victim as a result.
I mean, it definitely changed our viewership for certain things, but this happened they announced it. I mean, they literally were public with it, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I can't remember quite when it was, but
my issue with it is just that he treats it like, these very online problems are the most important thing in the world. I don't think Glenn is seeing things that aren't there. I just think he's amplifying the wrong things.
That's my. I was gonna say my problem is he blames newspaper journalists for tech doing this sort of stuff, and not tech's actual profit motive and lust for power in these areas.
Yeah,
and there is a solution to making that less relevant, and that is by vigorous antitrust regulations that breaks up the monopolies that these companies have, and makes it so that it is irrelevant if you're on a platform that your algorithm doesn't match up because some other platform will elevate you. And it is no longer you are locked out of the town square. It is that there's a bunch of town squares. And so there is no one place where everybody's aggregated. And that's, I don't know what other solution there is. I mean, I personally am in favor of one of those antitrust regulations being you can't, we're going to literally limit how sophisticated your algorithm is. And so that there are a bunch of factors that you cannot take into consideration, certain amounts of data from your users that you cannot mine. And therefore, and I had this argument with the guy from EFF who was like, well, I want to get the videos I want to watch. And I'm just like, well, you know what? Sorry, if it becomes to have if it disadvantages our society, our civil society in some fashion, it was the same thing with the big gulps that, that Bloomberg said you can't, people were my freedom. Well, I don't have the freedom to get a 14-ounce bottle of Coke either. They just sell it in 12 and 16. Is that an infringement on my freedom? It's just who gets to decide,
There was that woman who was fired from Google for voicing out. I apologize. I can't remember her name. She is a woman of color who was fired for voicing the algorithm's disproportionate push. It's not that it's accidental or it's about just data. It is specifically pushing a narrative that they deem more valuable than others. And she was mentioning it was racist and gendered, which is, I don't know if that's the intention, but it is the result of gearing towards a certain direction.
I think that's
Who
exactly
said that?
right.
Naomi? Because that's what the Google union.
Yes.
Okay.
There was a woman, I'll look up her name, I'll come back in a second. There was a woman who was fired from Google for exposing this, and she was literally in charge of making sure that the platform was more balanced and neutral and representative of, and she got fired for exposing it. internally.
Is that stuff sells, particularly on a platform that is, in many respects, not dominated, but certainly populated with, people who want to get that information and, want that sort of disposition. I mean, it's like, it's not terribly, there's a lot of themes that are similar to like Gamergate. Let's put it that way. Coach McGurk, why is everyone on Majority Report so good looking? We actually have a program here on the show where we all go out and do like a spa day and have reconstructive surgery.
Yeah, I mean,
it's virtual for me though. I just watch you guys from my own spa day.
Yeah,
and what we do is also we put pantyhose on the lenses. That's
right.
One of the old tricks.
Filtration system. Actually illegal, but we do it anyway.
Is that illegal?
Requiring us to have reconstructive surgery is
Is that really illegal?
Yeah. It's not a requirement. It is
have to stop the show early.
Perk.
Suggestion. It's suggestion. That's
and it's like when Fox News makes you wear pantyhose and a skirt. It's a suggestion, or else you're on at 2:00 in the morning.
John from Cleveland, do you guys think there should be a common sense age ceiling in important positions of federal power?
It's too relative to make a ceiling. Like, if Bernie's still doing good work, Dianne Feinstein, obviously, but
I think there is an argument maybe for a certain, like, in general, I don't like term limits, but it's conceivable to me that maybe like, when you start to get to like the second or third decade that you're in there, maybe there's some value in it for that respect. Like, I think there is value in having lawmakers who are in there for an extended period of time, who have some institutional knowledge. But I also think that, yes, we're in a particularly difficult time right now, particularly in the Democratic Party. Now, this is going to be a problem for like your generation, Emma. It's not like, like because what's going to happen is
and her generation too. Do you think I'm much older?
Well, for you,
my filter's not as great, I guess. Jeez.
For you guys, because like there in 5 or 10 years, there's a whole generation of Democrats who are going to be out the door. And then there's not going to be a generation that dominates the Democrats. My generation will have maybe 3 or 4 years. And then it's just immediately going to be you guys and millennials. And then the real problem is going to be like in 30 or 40 years, 50 years, because you guys are going to live, probably a little bit longer as a generation. And then you're going to have but
we'll just be underwater. That's all. We'll turn into fish and we'll conduct our legislatures from below the sea.
You think our life expectancy is as good as boomers, Sam? I think it's much lower.
It's lower.
Definitely.
You think so, Brad?
Absolutely. Yeah. Healthcare expenses have gone up, exponentially over our lifetime alone. So.
The opioid crisis.
Well, the opioid crisis is what is doing it right now. Yeah. But I think that I think in time that's going to pass, and then I think it's going to continue to grow. I think there's just going to be technology, frankly, that is going to extend the lives, particularly of lawmakers. I mean, look, Larry King, I just heard, is out of the.
Amazing.
Much better.
That's unreal.
And it is because Larry King is going in there and he is getting the treatment that I was reading that there's the
Chris Christie.
Well, there is the I can't remember the name of it now, but there is a treatment that is just basically sitting in the hospitals. It is not offered to people who come in, through the emergency room, or unless they have high expensive doctors. It is there. They have stored up on it. There's excess of this stuff. It's just that there's nobody there advocating giving it to them. It probably costs a lot. And I think there's, I don't like, that's why we don't have any senators who are dying from this. Why Chris Christie, why Giuliani, why Trump, who knows who else in the administration. why we're not hearing of any high profile people. I think like Herman Cain was probably the last like wealthy person who was going to die from COVID because they now have, these drugs that if you get in there within the first 4 or 5 days and they give you this, they can stop the virus from replicating in you.
Yeah.
Arun Chowdhury, who comes on our show on Thursdays, he was the chief videographer, the only videographer, I think, for Obama. And he was a creative director for Bernie in 2016. And he's in the White House every day. And he said this, I'd never heard this before, that every single president, I think modern president, including Obama, has to take a mix of stimulants, like drugs, not vitamins, drugs, every single day for immunity, for being like alert. I was blown away. It's on our show. You can watch it and I can find out what the stimulants are. But there really is a whole other set of drugs available for lawmakers.
I want to know what those stimulants are.
Yeah, I do too. Trust me.
I have a similar story. I have a friend whose mother is a leading like geriatrics doctor, and she was chosen as the doctor for if either of the Bushes or Clinton ended up becoming like senile. Like she was just going to be brought in behind the curtain to like make sure that they're presentable.
I think Trump takes a double dose of those stimulants, by the way. I mean, that call, not to get on a sidetrack, but he hadn't clearly taken them, or he'd taken his benzos when he called Georgia and like the Georgia Secretary of State, and he was slurring his words so much. Like he doesn't drink, the guy, right?
Right.
Neither does Biden, by the way.
Sniffing Adderall.
I didn't know that Biden doesn't drink.
Remember the beer summit? And he didn't drink a beer.
I mean, all power to them. Good for them. That's I'm not drinking the start of January, and it's
all that dry January.
I did that last year and this year. Good job, Emma. We can share stories.
I really just decided that I'm not going to do it the whole month of January because my boyfriend's birthday is coming up, and then but like I can't do the whole January, I don't think. But I'm trying.
I did it last year, and I thought I was going to break. My birthday's in January also. And then I got on a high, and I went another month. Something happens chemically.
Yeah. It's not
right?
hard. It's just like, maybe it is hard. I don't know. Because I'm like, I'm
kombucha. The alcohol-free kombucha. I definitely recommend it.
Okay.
I'm not going to have any cookies. That's what I'm trying to stop eating cookies in January.
See, then that's what's changed. Now I eat a night, like at least 2 ice cream sandwiches a night because I don't, so I get your release somewhere.
Yeah, no, I understand. Believe me. All right. Well, this is actually exciting. So, as you know, Cedric Richmond was appointed to what was Richmond appointed to in the Biden cabinet?
Senior advisor and something else.
But
he's a senior advisor.
Right. And so it is so that seat in Louisiana, 2nd district, is now vacant. There's going to be a special election. And we played a clip from this guy. His name is Gary Chambers. And he had really, it was a really impressive confrontation. The clip went viral with I think it was the city council there. And he has announced that he's running for Congress. And let's check this out. This is his first ad.
Most of you know me from this video with Connie. So I had intended to get up here and talk about how racist Robert E. Lee was, but I'm gonna talk about you, Connie. Sitting over there shopping while we talking about Robert E. Lee. But I'm gonna talk about Louisiana today. The people of Baton Rouge know me for fighting for health care access in North Baton Rouge, helping change the name of Lee High School to Liberty High, fighting to keep the zoo in North Baton Rouge, and a $300 million investment coming to a divested community. Because change doesn't just happen. We fight to make change happen. Most of your run-of-the-mill politicians, career politicians, will tell you we're doing a great job. But the truth is, we understand that they haven't been taking care of the health, welfare, and the safety of our community. The numbers don't lie. Folks that grew up on streets like this, on Oreo, Like me and my complex family story. My mother committed suicide when I was 2 months old, and my father struggled with alcoholism. So my village stepped in, and my aunt and uncle became my mother and father. And communities like Oreo Street and all over this country understand that our fight for change requires that we come together the same way my family did to help bring me forth. We've got to bring our state forward, so our children have a state that they can live in, thrive in, and prosper in, instead of leaving for what they see as greener pastures. We've got to fight for clean air and green jobs, because we understand with the closure of Shell in Convent and the hundreds of jobs that we're losing, if we marry our state to one industry, we are married to their prosperity or their demise. And the future of jobs for our children requires that we look at the Green New Deal. This global pandemic that has shown us the inequities that exist in our healthcare system means that we have to fight for Medicare for all, to give every American a fair shot when they get sick. The truth is, profit should not be the determining factor of the quality of care you get when you go see a physician. It should be about health care and serving people. You have inspired me to jump into this race, to go and fight in Washington for change for all people. I am unapologetic in my positions and unafraid to speak truth to power. It's what I know how to do best, and it's what we need in D.C. What I'm asking you to do is take this journey with me, from East Baton Rouge to West Baton Rouge.
All right, yeah, I want to
love this guy.
People check it out.
I love this guy.
Google it, but yeah, I mean this is another guy who's going to be a very, if he can win in this district, another guy who's going to be very, very progressive in the House, and this is how you build it. It's very slow. It's one at a time. But, and you build every person you add to, the squad or squad adjacent, essentially, ends up, inspiring other people to run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is how you begin to sort of create some type of velocity.
Yeah.
Right.
And thank you to Biden for opening up the seat for a more progressive candidate for appointing Cedric Richmond. I mean, Richmond took so much money from fossil fuel industries, and to have a candidate coming out and framing the Green New Deal in 2 sentences in a way that's digestible for people specific to Louisiana, about you could apply this to the coal industry in West Virginia. You can apply this argument to all these other states that are way too reliant on, fracking, for example, in Pennsylvania. Say you want to make the argument in Western Pennsylvania. There is a way to talk about the Green New Deal as economic opportunity for people that's succinct, that's easily digestible, and that just makes sense. And he did that within a breath.
I remember when Obama appointed Janet Napolitano to Homeland Security, and she was a Democrat in Arizona, and we know how Arizona turned this year. That was 10 years ago, right? More than 10 years ago at this point. And it left Republican governors, a legacy of Republican governors. And I do want to call attention to that Biden has been very thoughtful about his appointments when it comes to people in the office and creating space for it's Democratic seats, it's safe Democratic seats. But that is the power of really challenging these conservative Democrats, is they often represent highly Democratic seats, very Democratic seats. And they include a lot more progressives. And in a case like this one, this is a district that has not received the resources, very similar to Cori Bush. Her district had just not received the resources it deserved and needed, it was paying into, and had been neglected. And so it's really powerful to see him step up. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage, guys. I mean, I know we talk about this all the time, but 2 years ago, Ro Khanna was saying he was a lonely voice in Congress, even in the Progressive Caucus. And now how many do we have? How many squad members? How many? It's little by little, but it's actually quite a bit of movement in the last 2 years.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. We should primary all of them, though, anyway.
I mean.
Oh, you mean the squad? Yeah, they're sellouts. Are we allowed to say that as MSNBC? I didn't get the memo today, guys. I was a little late to the party.
I'm the one who's restricted by MSNBC. I believe it is you are restricted by the CIA.
Oh, right. Shit.
That's wrong.
I missed my last meeting.
You have the wrong.
And NATO pays me through TYT.
I get the residuals from there.
Someone just IM'd. I didn't catch who it was, but like, along those lines, in terms of Biden, it would be nice. Like, this is the one time I'd be like, let's. Okay, you put in Gina Raimondo. I think there's a rumor that she's going to be made Commerce Secretary. What I'd like to see is like, what about Susan Collins? How about offering up her? Like, how about a new, whatever it is.
What's the weakest cabinet post?
Yes, exactly. Can we create one? Like Department of Republicans. There you go. Republican outreach.
I think
Czar.
they Sam Brownback was made when they tried to like basically, they were so embarrassed by Sam Brownback's work in Kansas. They made him the ambassador to faith. Literally.
To faith?
Wait,
yes.
Who did?
I think it was under Trump. I think they wanted to get Brownback out of there so badly. They made him the ambassador to faith. I think it is.
So
I mean, somebody
he's
look
like
that
the
up.
Pope. He's the guy who speaks to God.
He speaks to faith.
Right, Faith Hill.
I think they're missing the point of like putting someone in exile. You gotta you gotta send them far away to an island.
I misspoke. He is the ambassador at large for international religious freedom. And so I'm thinking you do something like that with Collins, right? Or somewhere where you think you can get a pickup on a seat like that. And that she could be the ambassador to goodwill, international goodwillism or
the
something.
Commander of the Space Force.
Yeah, or adjacent.
I think we have to rebrand that though now. It's got to have a new like glitzy title that sounds progressive.
Mr. Sunshine says, please frame Emma and Sam so they occupy the same part of the frame. Emma always sits lower. You got to like.
Okay. Can I adjust this next episode?
Next episode.
Yeah.
You tilt down. You got a little too much headroom, I think.
Well, because sometimes I sit up straight, but I'm like,
sometimes I do this too. So
I worked out in the morning, so I woke up really early. My energy levels were like falling down. So then I leave.
I thought you're supposed to you work out, you get more energy.
Well, I thought so too, Sam, but
guess it didn't work out that way.
It didn't work out.
So much for your New Year's resolution.
Everything's falling apart.
Oh, here we go. This is a good idea. HCE says, I nominate Susan Collins to the Secretary of Concerned.
That's funny.
Hey, here is Donald Trump in Georgia, sort of like just letting it all hang out, playing out in his head, like how much is he going to like Mike Pence after tomorrow? Because tomorrow there is going to be the vote to certify the Electoral College. There are at least, I think, 11 or 12 Republican senators at this point who have announced that they are not going to certify the electoral count. And Mike Pence is going to be presiding over the Senate, as is tradition. And the question is like, what is Mike Pence going to do? And there was rumors that he wasn't going to show. Chuck Grassley had come out and said he's not showing. And then the Pence people said, no, he's going to show. And play this video. This is clip number 3.
And I hope Mike Pence comes through for us, I have to tell you. I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much.
What?
No, Mike is a great guy. He's a wonderful man and a smart man and a man that I like a lot. But he's going to have a lot to say about it. And one thing with him, you're going to get straight shots. He's going to call it straight.
Yeah, that's when I think of Mike Pence. I think honest, straight shooter.
Yeah, I wonder if that's
in some way.
I wonder if that's like a hint at like
it's the mob boss thing that we're talking about.
Threat.
Yes,
it's a threat, but he does it publicly, so everyone shuts it off.
I'm telling you right now, he's straight. There's no other thing. There's nothing else to report.
But like, what's going to happen? You're out of office in like 15 days.
There's a veiled threat by Donald Trump.
But like,
it's Trump back in GOP primary mode where he's obsessed with all of the oppo on all the other Republicans.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's straight. He's a straight shooter. He's straight as far as we know, Right, everybody? Definitely straight. Play this clip. This is from CNN. I don't know who the people are. I just sent it to you guys. Who is this? Who I can't remember.
It's John Berman and Allison Camerata.
Yeah.
2 reporters for CNN.
Yeah, 2 reporters.
Did you film this, Sam?
Huh?
Did you film this on your TV?
No, I didn't film this on my TV. Here, go play.
Oh.
You have to feel for Vice President Mike Pence today because this can't be an easy.
I don't. It's in the Constitution.
But he's getting.
How hard is it to do your freaking job?
I'm not saying he won't.
Yeah. All right. I love it.
There we
you
go.
She used to work for Fox, though. Don't forget this.
No, I know. I mean, like, again.
I didn't remember.
What was that? What I saw, I forget where it was written, but that networks are concerned about what's going to go down after Trump leaves office. Just because.
Oh, I know it's going to go down. Their ratings.
I know. What are they going to do next? But like, that's why I got a little frustrated with the Trump administration specific outrage. It's never really broadly the Republican Party, because then they'll have Republicans on who will talk about how bad Trump is, and that's pornography for them, basically. But when you don't have the singular boogeyman of how Trump is actually very different than the other Republicans, and you can't put that wall in between, I wonder how they're going to adjust their coverage. I really do.
Yep. Marzin from Chicago says, Pence, straight but curious. Straight shooter but curious. That's the all right, should we play? Oh, here we go. Here is Charlie Kirk. And this is what they're thinking about this. Mike Pence, straight shooter, straight but curious shooter. Here's Charlie Kirk letting it, here we go. It's up to Mike Pence. This is Mike Pence. This could be Mike Pence's make or break moment for his run in 2024. Honestly, right? I mean, like, make no mistake about it. If he lets Donald Trump down, Trump is going to, hammer him for the next year and a half.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So the final outcome can be this. Believe it or not, there is a almost guaranteed way that Donald Trump serves 4 more years. It's this simple.
Think so.
Mike Pence listens to the objections. He listens to the claims and the complaints. And he says, based on the power and the authority granted to me as President of the United States Senate and my oath to the Constitution of the United States, I refuse to certify at this very moment the election results of Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Therefore, no person, no candidate has reached the 270 majority threshold, and the United States House of Representatives shall decide this election. Gavel out. That's it. He doesn't have to grant the electors to Trump. I actually wouldn't support that. I think that would be a power leap.
That would be a power leap.
All
power leap
Pence has to do.
Look it up.
Touch it.
Is reject electors from states that are compromised.
Some
people say that's not constitutional. Then try it.
No, that was for
make them sue and get the Supreme Court into action. Because we have precedent that a vice president can reject state electors.
Mom, why did you do that to me?
That's the pillow.
New one.
The tennis racket.
Yeah,
yes.
the tennis racket.
That's part of the.
His logo a rip-off of the Majority Report logo or a rip-off of AOC's 2016 campaign
a little bit.
logo?
Yeah, I think
It's a
probably
mix.
I feel like he's a sportscaster now. He's got like this. He's trying to be a frat boy doing sportscast.
Well, what's interesting is that he got, when you could actually see him scroll to his talking points to have to come back to it at that moment. And it's that's what Donald Trump is thinking about, right? When he was talking in Georgia, that's what he was talking about. Mike Pence is straight shooter. He's going to do it. He's going to do it. You wait and see tomorrow. And
it's so convoluted that where could Charlie have gotten that from, if not from just like
somebody's sending this stuff out,
Yeah,
and
that's
this is what they're pushing. And if he doesn't do it, I mean, I haven't listened to some right-wing talk radio recently, but I think I'm going to check it out. I'd be curious what like Mark Levin is saying these days. This is where, Pence is sitting there and he's going like, Mother, do you think I should make Donald Trump rule that Donald Trump is the president, or should I not do this? Which is going to be the one, like, I think this is where Mike Pence basically does not become president, the nominee in 2024.
I don't think he's gonna. First off, I don't think he's gonna budge. I think this is a last-ditch lobbying effort by the wacky right-wing shows. Not all the right wing, which is important because I think Mike Pence knows it's over, and if he wants a future, I mean, that's why Trump is like literally threatening him from the stage. Have you ever heard him do that before? Have you ever in the last 4 years? It's his this is him throwing everything against the wall, and ultimately, if it's going to come down to like 4 posts on YouTube, I don't think it's going to lobby him.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about Pence is he's been a loyal soldier to Trump throughout. I mean, I go back to that Atlantic piece that was written about how he saw serving Trump was part of his biblical duty, and how even the Trump campaign people were shocked at how he would just be so amenable to whatever outrage Trump was putting out at the time, because it wasn't quotidian then. It was looked at as ridiculous during the 2016 campaign, even more so, I guess, than it was now, because it was more novel. And still, Pence would not have a problem with it, and he'd defend. So him not coming to Trump's defense here, it says a lot. And even if he has any cachet left over with MAGA heads going into 2024, his complete lack of charisma is going to undercut that.
Yeah, he was a very unlikable guy, or unliked guy, I should say, in Indiana. But all right, lastly, let's do this. There is this. It is so disturbing, folks, what's going on in Congress. Of course, it all has to do with pronouns. And this is where we're going to get a lot of this. And they're trying desperately to sort of rev this up, where it's going to be, they shift to culture in moments when in doubt. They shift to sort of like some type of culture war on the right. Here is Kilmeade and Ainsley Earhart talking about the new House rules about pronouns and naming conventions. Incidentally, we should do number 7 too. Okay, let's. All right, we should do both of them?
I think they both get to the same point that you're making right now about shifting the culture.
Oh, okay. So, all right, this is our first one. So this is the first shift to culture, right? And look, in the House, there are rules about you can't name people specifically. You cannot criticize, like, you can get censured essentially or admonished because there's, sort of rules about being polite to people. Mm-hmm. But when they encroach upon our cultural values, my goodness, here's clip number 8.
Where does this stuff come from, and how could this be the first thing on your agenda? The other thing on her agenda is exactly the fear that everyone worries about with happening in Georgia. She's going to go try to make D.C. a state. So, okay, let's do gender-neutral terms, make D.C. a state. Oh, there's a pandemic. Vaccines are having trouble getting out of the hopper. We got 2 more that got to be approved. You have a situation where you have an emerging China. I can go over 25 other things that should even be mentioned. This shouldn't even be considered. Whose agenda is this? If I asked Nancy Pelosi this 10 years ago, do you think she would have said where?
So they're bemoaning the fact that there's talk of Georgia's statehood, and there's talk DC statehood, and the idea that House rules are we're just going to not have gendered references to Congress people. And like, he's complaining about all these things that are broken in America that she's supposedly not dealing with. Hey, dude, you have a national television show every day that you have not complained about these broken things. who's been in charge of the country? It's as if it like just all these problems just showed up out of nowhere today.
Well, what's really crazy is they have to lump DC statehood with something that's like makes people angry in the Fox audience, but that's pretty freaking racist. Like, have you ever heard them mention DC statehood ever on Fox News? And if so, it's probably was something that they're more outraged about. So now it's all lumped together. When you hear DC statehood, you think pronouns, liberal agenda, rather than what's so controversial about DC statehood to Republicans?
Well, there's a lot of problems in the country that just that came out right after because Joe Biden is the president-elect. That's. I mean,
I will say that DC statehood is a pretty easy cultural argument for the right to get people to dislike. I mean, one, we want all 50 states. It's all we've ever known. This is society, American flag, 50 stars. And also just DC is filled with swampy elites with a liberal agenda, and we don't want them having more power.
Or people of color, which is what this is really about.
I know.
Yes. We could play that ad from that new congresswoman too, with her packing.
Yes.
The extremely wealthy, expensive part of Washington, D.C. But here, is there any more of that clip? Keep playing it.
Years ago, do you think she would have said, where did that come from? We don't care about that. Who is pushing this stuff forward?
Brian, she's saying if it's ombudsman, change it to omsbud. Don't add the man. But my question yesterday when we were in a break, I said, does that mean Congresswoman needs to change to Congress? Is she Congress Pelosi now?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, that's gender specific, Congresswoman.
Congress member.
Congress member.
Because they're already members of Congress. You just.
Oh my God.
Horrific would that be if they called people congressperson?
Once again, Ducey, coming in, trying to check them. He is.
Well, to be honest with you, Congress member is really not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
He's like, guys.
Ducey, I mean, he's like
quit.
Check on Fox and Friends, but he'll only very lightly do it. He's just like a little drizzle of salt on top, right? I don't know.
Does his son still work there? His son's a reporter for Fox. It'd be interesting. Maybe he's.
No, I saw them sitting together at the Bernie rally.
Oh, in the press section. I thought you meant they were like a secret Bernie supporters.
No. I was like, that guy looks like a younger Steve Ducey, and then I realized it's Steve Ducey and his son.
Yeah. Oh, he's the one who went up to Ossoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He looks like him.
Yep.
They got the same hair and everything.
Son, good try, but it just didn't work out for you. Sorry. Here is, speaking of the last entrance into the culture war. Here's Fox and Friends, and this is where they've got to really cultivate the aggrievance, the conservative aggrievance. We're going to hear this so much, folks. You're not allowed to be a conservative anymore. You're not allowed to speak. This is basically just an extension of you can't comment on, like it used to be. I could come in and I could see my secretary and I could say, "Hey, sweetie, you got great legs." And now you can't do that. I mean, we're so oppressed. And here it is. Here's Will Cain and Pete Hegseth on the weekend Fox and Friends, I think it is.
And sometimes Pete and I pretend to be friends on television, but we are friends sometimes off camera as well. We were having a steak last night talking about this, and this is how I feel. I think Americans, I think Republicans, conservatives can be forgiven for their skepticism, because whether or not an election was rigged, it certainly feels like society is rigged right now. From the complete squelching of dissent on college campuses, inside the media institutions, to being lied about the Hunter Biden story, to watching President Trump impeached, every step of the way watching President Trump undermine his legitimacy question, that when you deal with that for not just 4 years, but decades, you start to think, if not an election, the entire society is rigged against people who hold my values. And at some point, Steve Ainsley and Brian, you begin to understand that kind of skepticism.
Especially at the end when you're told, no, you can't question it. There will be no questioning at the end. The more you're told not to question, the more you're told not to challenge, the more people feel like, something's not right here.
See, they're so close to understanding that there is a rigged system, but they just completely are on the polar opposite of what is actually rigged about it, because it's all about, we're the victim.
I think it's very thoughtful, and they're trying to prey on vulnerable people and flip it to, this is where you should channel your energy. It's not that the economy is broken because of the oligarchs. It's the immigrants' fault. It's not this. The society is rigged because of college campus suppression. What?
Because of wokeness. I mean, here's the thing that's really sort of gross is that I can tell you, like, I knew Will Cain back when he was on CNN like a decade ago. And that dude is playing a part. And it is, I mean, it is, we'll talk about cynicism.
Oh,
that
yeah.
that is just
so many of these folks. I mean, that we were talking about Meghan McCain earlier, and if she truly has an ideology, you'd be shocked at how many of these pundits on television are really just pretending for the camera and are basically news actors.
It's stunning.
And their backgrounds too. I mean, what's his name? The guy who, oh my God, you know, he has that show. He's a big Trump person. He's young. He's kind of attractive. He's from Pennsylvania. He had an affair, got married to another person who's an intern on Fox News. Very recent. Whatever. I'll think of his name in a second. You know who he is. He's one of the most egregious people on Fox.
Jesse Waters.
Jesse Waters. Thank you. Jesse Waters' parents are like union members and activists. And he has like a progressive background, and he just flipped because Bill O'Reilly said this is the kind of guy that we need to bring in, and groomed him.
There are clips of him reading out tweets or texts his mom sent him saying, "You should be actually ashamed of what you're doing." And he's like, "Haha, mom."
Yeah, I remember those clips. I mean, yeah, it's all really cynical, and part of, like, I think a lot of the hatred of the media sometimes comes from a bad place that's engendered by people like Trump. But then there are those disingenuous moments where you're like, if this is what people think the media is, I get why they hate the media.
All right, let's do a couple IMs and we'll get out of here because Nomi's got her show in just 7 minutes. Social praxis. I see democratic socialism as an answer to corrupting influence of power. The means of production are what generate wealth, and the people that must own them in order to decentralize power. The hierarchies are unjust. I mean, I think like it depends on how. I mean, I think the guest Chayes would argue that heading down that road is exactly the point. The question is like, at what point do you get? And I'm not saying she would not want this, but I think she's saying like it's too hard to define what is a society that has no capitalism. I mean, I think that was sort of her point about France, right? Is more socialistic than America, but still capitalistic. Max Marine. I mean, I think like, you know, I think, for instance, like Jamie would say that if you have any capitalism left in society, it is necessarily going to come roaring back. And I guess I am of the mind that corruption and will to power exist regardless of what kind of economic system you have. And that, for me, I would prefer some tension. I just think that
I'd also stress you can have markets without capitalism also. Like capitalism is a particular ownership structure. And you can have like, you know, organizations that produce, for instance, co-ops instead of capitalists. And I think that's something like Richard Wolff particularly emphasizes.
Yes.
Max Marine, why do some Dems contest the results of Texas and Florida, say they went to Biden since the GOP has rolled out the crazy carpet? I don't get that. Also realize that the government has produced more evidence of UFOs than voter fraud in the past 6 months. That's true. Big Dick Cheney, John from San Antonio is a national treasure. Indeed. Ballot harvester. I irresponsibly went to the California Sonoran Desert Camp for New Year's. My one stop at a shop, I saw a cop with a shirt with a rat crossed out in the front that says, "Not today, IA, not today." How are we supposed to reform these people again?
I don't get it. I don't get it.
I'm not sure I get it.
Okay.
Sam secretly likes Obama. Sam, you should see how nuanced the MR Reddit community is about everything. You've cultivated a great audience. Everyone should search for the Majority Report, one word, and to join the conversation. Check it out, folks. The Majority Report on Reddit.
Yes, I mean, Sam deserves a lot of credit because it's really important. You can cultivate a certain kind of audience and push forward certain narratives in a responsible way. And
I see where you're going with this.
Some people can't.
Unix joke.
Can I make one comment about that? I texted you. Can I just say to the majority part audience how grateful, I'm sure everybody probably feels this way too, how grateful we are, because this has been insanity online. And there have been countless phone calls, emails, texts. I got a care package from somebody about the hate that's happening right now online and how, this collective like nuance community is getting targeted in really weird ways. So I just, for myself at least, I say, I'm very grateful. Thank you guys, because I'm watching your comments and I'm seeing you guys back us up and send love.
Yeah,
That's great.
They're pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
I guess IA is internal affairs, and they're considered rats. That's what that is. Unix Joker, about the monoclonal antibody treatments. That's what it is. They're expensive, but not so much compared to one typical hospital cost, $3,000 treatment. Only people who are eligible to get them are patients who are high risk of developing critical cases, but who have not yet developed a critical case. If you already need oxygen when you come in, they are unlikely to help. Problem is, for a normal person to be able to get admitted early, you can imagine why, given a lot of narratives, people waiting until they start feeling deleterious symptoms to seek help because 99% survival. It'll just get better, by which point it's too late for the early intervention. Interesting. Meg McCah. Apparently some counties in Florida are using Eventbrite to set up COVID vaccination appointments. All right, 3 more of these. Really cool. Jeff from Georgia is on the phone. And Fairchild. Jeff from Georgia sounds like a Homestar runner. Love him and y'all. Swearth, the Democratic Party may not care about us, but the Republican Party is happy to grind us to dust if there's a short-term profit in it. And the final IM of the day. Rube Davin. Sam, what do you think about the possibility that 2018 versus 2020 is mostly due to a massive bump in people who came out simply because they love and wanted to vote for Trump? They vote straight ticket Republican. It wasn't enough for Trump to win, but it was enough to affect all the down ballot races. Well, that wouldn't make sense because then Trump would have won. And hopefully all these people will stay home today while Democrats remain activated. I think it's the opposite. I think I think there were Republicans who were sort of low-hanging, on the fence Republicans who came out and decided to vote against Trump, but wanted to vote for the Republican senators. I don't know. We'll find out.
It's COVID too, the ballot access.
Yep. Em and I will hop on the stream later tonight. Nomi, good job today. Thank you, folks. Check out her show today in just about 1 minute. Emma, good job. Brendan, Matt, good job. 5 minutes. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there.